Hey, everybody. Can you guys see me today? Can anybody hear me? I want to make sure I'm being heard. Hello, hello. Oh, that great. Hawk says we can hear and see. Great. Thanks, everybody. Apologies for the little bit of confusion there. This was meant to launch in like an hour, and fortunately, Alexis kind of came and got me. Was like, hey, they set it up for now. So apologies for running a little late. This is me flying solo today. Alexis is doing Christmas stuff. So, not even sure why I have the headphones on. Can't hear anything. But it is great to see you guys. And we're going to be talking about one of my favorite things today, which is really fun. Yes, check out my cool Christmas sweater for 40K. Big fan of it. And if anybody does super chats and I miss them, because normally Alexis is the one who grabs them, and I miss them to super chat, just comment and chat a few times, and I'll try to see it and grab it later on. So let's just look at some of these. Say S00, how are you, Ross? I'm good. It's the most wonderful time of the year. It's Christmas Day. Okay, all right. So crank that off. Merry Christmas, and to all, an afternoon to you. Yes, thank you very much, Jonathan King. Merry Christmas to everybody. Fun little Christmas present I got this year. Thought I'd show it off. I have a lot of 40K themed stuff in my house. You can all see all that around me, but bear with me. I'm going to try and get my composure here just a little bit from, oh crap, I got to stream right now. So today we're talking about something that's really important to me. It's the 13th great company of the Space Wolves. Ooh, these guys have been around for a long time in the lore. I believe they were first mentioned in the second edition Space Wolves Codex. And I made an army for them while I was at Games Workshop in 2003 and 2004. They were one of my favorite armies I ever played. I played the heck out of these guys in 4th edition. And despite my my Dark Angels hat, which Dark Angels are my favorite, Space Wolves are a close second, and 13th Company especially is a big thing for me. So why do I like the 13th Company more than the other Space Wolves? They have a slightly more gritty and dirty look to them. I feel like, and their lore and the context around it is really fascinating. Because the 13th Company disappeared very early on from the Space Wolves and have only recently reappeared. So they have a lot of the sensibilities of the Post-heresy era Space Wolves while being in the modern era Indomitus, something that's really cool for me. So there are a lot of stories, a lot of sagas, a lot of different accounts of the 13th Company and how they came to be and what they're all about. I've actually got some helpful images today to kind of show you guys a little bit of what I'm talking about. So I'm going to see if I can set this up to do a share. Yep, here we go. Boom. And now I can see, there it is. The images are now on screen. Look at that. This is the emblem of the 13th Company. It's a blood red wolf on a crescent moon. I think it just looks rad. It's super cool. Like I said, these guys have been around for a long time. And we will get into that, but I want to show some images early so we can kind of go over like what they are and what they're all about. Make sure I can, there we go. So this here is called the Grand Annalus. I know we're gonna be, this is like deep lore, so I need to back up and like start kind of from the more shallow end of the pool and get into the deeper end of the pool. 13th Company are a one of the 13 companies, the great companies of the Space Wolves chapter of the Space Marines. Now we had an episode about who the Space Marines are, so I'm going to assume everybody knows what Space Marines are. The Space Wolves are a specific chapter. They were one of the first founding legions prior to the Horus Heresy, and they have been around this entire time. They are one of the biggest, strongest, most influential, most well-known Space Marine chapters in existence. They come from a death world called Fenris, which is full of ice and snow and a lot of shifting tectonic plates. So there's only one like constant landmass, and the rest is all these like little ice flow islands that break up and shatter and reform. And oceans are full of extremely deadly beasts, and the wilderness on the islands and the one steady island are extremely deadly as well. The people there have a very Viking-like culture, and the Space Wolves have assimilated that culture into their chapter culture. So in this one landmass on Fenris, there is a fortress called the Fang, or the Ayet in their language. And in the Fang, this is the fortress monastery, the home of the Space Wolves. They have a chamber set aside where they have a massive stone table, and that's called the Grand Annulus. In the center, that emblem is for the Great Wolf. When Layman Russ was around, it was his symbol. And then each of the great companies commanded by a Wolf Lord has their own stone tablet that's basically inserted around this core. Okay, so if you see this image here, there are 12 great companies and then a blank space. The blank space is set aside for the 13th company. And for a long time, they were just kind of a mystery. In fact, a lot of their origins still are mysterious. We have yet to learn all of the secrets of the 13th company. We know many of them, and some of them are pretty wild. So yeah, this is the Grand Annulus. This is the blank emblem. The 13th company vanished very early on, and we'll get into that, I promise. And a couple thousand years after the end of the Horus Heresy, the Thousand Sons and Magnus the Red, the actual Primarch, they attacked Fenris in what was called the Battle of the Fang. And it was this pretty massive assault on Fenris. Magnus actually killed the Great Wolf at the time. And after that event, they removed the 13th Company's emblem from the Grand Annulus because they kind of believed they were gone forever. And that this blank stone, it was actually like onyx, I believe, like black onyx stone, came to represent all the Space Wolves that had died, disappeared, or turned renegade. It was like the stone to represent the lost or the missing. So that's what this image is about and why it's here. So now we're going to show off some official artwork of the 13th Company. There's not a lot. Congrats, we're an hour early. So anybody who shows up after about 45 minutes from now is going to be like, wow, this thing's been going for a while. Anyway, I do appreciate Al's patience and showing up with me on Christmas, because what the hell? Let's celebrate Christmas with some Werewolf boys. That's all fun. Always a good time. Professor Shep says wolves, lots of wolves. Yeah, we're gonna discuss that. We are going to get into it. So yeah, these are images of what are called Wulfen, which are mutant werewolf space wolves. We'll get into that. But I wanted to show off the cool official art before we got into the models, because the cool official art, there's just not very much for the 13th Company. Oop, there we go. So here's a couple images of these guys, again, showing Wulfen, the werewolf mutant space wolves. The artwork is interesting, but wait till you see the models. Let's just put it that way. Check out the guy on the right. This is actually from the 13th Black Crusade book that was published in 2004 when I was working there. And they took part in what is now kind of an alternate history. We'll talk about that too. But I want you to check out that art, because wow, that's what the Wulfen look like in terms of official art. Let me go ahead and drop this for a minute and consult my notes, because I did write a pretty good script for this. Okay, so yeah, these guys were this 13th Black Crusade, 13th Company. There's a lot of 13s. I remember the 13th Company when they started appearing in White Dwarf and Codex Eye of Terror. We're going to talk about those. And I was like, whoa, Space Werewolves, cool. Yeah, it's me too. Same, Professor Shapp, absolutely. They were first mentioned in the second edition Space Wolves Codex, and then described briefly in the year 2000, in a White Dwarf article by Andy Chambers, which I believe is what Professor Shapp's talking about. And then they got onto the main stage in third edition, right at the end of third edition, with the 13th Black Crusade rulebook. They had their own army list. That's when I started playing them, because that came out while I was working at the U.S. headquarters in Glen Burnie, Maryland. And one of the things that would really attracted me to the 13th Company was that because they'd been lost in the warp for so long, their official models all combined Imperial and Chaos Space Marine mini bits. Like they had Chaos Space Marine backpacks with Space Marine armor, non-Chaos Space Marine armor. And it presented kind of some really interesting modeling challenges. I built my Space Wolves as if they had been fighting Iron Warriors the whole time. So they were chock full of weird bionics, and I had some parts that were painted in the hazard stripes of the Iron Warriors and stuff. And I just had like this whole story I had told in my head of my particular part of the 13th Great Company that had been fighting Iron Warriors and had come back to help in the big thing, the big final battle, the 13th Company, 13th Great Crusade, 13th Black Crusade. Man, I'm getting these things mixed up. So what was the 13th Black Crusade in 2004 as opposed to the one described in 2017? Lots of differences. Essentially, the 13th Black Crusade, as described in the rulebook from 2004, is now essentially alternate history. Like it presented a 13th Black Crusade by Abaddon that attacked Cadia and the entire Cadia system and involved the 13th Great Company and a whole bunch of other forces. Cadia did not get destroyed in that particular encounter. Professor Shapp said it's like the Storm of Chaos, but not. It is. So this is actually at the same time, like around the same time as the Storm of Chaos. So it's very similar. Good point. It is like the Storm of Chaos. It is essentially a non-canonical event, an alternate history event in 40K. And I don't want to get into it because that's like a whole subject. Like what was the 13th Black Crusade of 2004 should be a whole episode on its own. The short version is Abaddon attacked. Cadia did not fall. The pylons did not get destroyed. All that 2017 stuff did not happen. Andy Chambers ended up leaving the company. He was the guy in charge of 40K at the time. And they kind of refocused 40K at the start of 4th edition in a different direction. So fourth edition 40K onwards is this, and then the 13th Black Crusade kind of went off this direction. So yeah, it's an alternate history, and I don't want to get too far into that, but let's just say they had their own army list in this alternate history. Okay, so now we're past that. In the 5th edition codex is where we get the Grand Annalist, and we get that missing stone, which is why I brought that up. But before we get to talk about the 13th Great Company, God, I swear I'm gonna fix this. The 13th Great Company, 13th Company. We kind of have to talk about the Space Wolves gene seed, because Space Wolves have a very unique gene seed, and this plays into why the 13th Company is the way they are and what Wulfen are. Again, we could do a whole episode on what are Wulfen, and we probably will. So I'll give you the short version as much as I can. The Space Wolf gene seed is unique, and the way that you become a Space Marine in the Space Wolves is also unique. When you are chosen to become a Space Marine, so you've been an aspirant, you've gone through all the trials and tests and battles, and you've managed to make it to the point where the Wolf Priests are like, okay, you might have what it takes. Okay, they undergo one final test. And this final test, they drink from this goblet called the Cup of the Wulfen. And inside the Cup of the Wulfen is it's a very specific part of the Primarch's genome called the Canis helix. And when they drink this, it's like it acts like a catalyst to prepare their bodies to accept all the implants and all the surgeries needed and the genetic procedures to turn them into full-fledged space wolves. And this would be a good time to take a break because we got some super chats and I want to go over those really quick. Boom. All right. Dowie Forever. Hey, great name. Big Dowie fan here. Merry Christmas. Stuff like this is what I want Space Marines to do more. Weird mutations, individualism, weird mounts. R.I.P. Wolfslay. It doesn't have to be a big part, but at least some uniques. I agree. The individual nature of the chapters is what sets them apart, and specifically the Space Wolves have their own idiosyncrasies, and then it's like a subgroup of a subgroup of a subgroup. You get the 13th Company. Bronze Scorpion, thank you, sir, says, can Wolf Priests ever be Wulfen? Also, I'm going to get into that so there's going to be a long version coming up, but the short answer is yes, they can. Okay, and then Happy Messies, Hapimeses. I guess I'm going to go with Hapimeses. Thank you very much, sir. Is that Andy? That might be Andy. Merry Christmas, you legend. I hope this makes up for the lack of a Santa hat. Yeah, that's Andy. Thank you, Andy. Appreciate you, buddy. Awesome. Okay. And we have a quick question here I want to answer from Halo is Haunted. Is it okay to post more than 40K minis in the posting thread? I don't see why not. I think we're probably only going to cover the 40K ones, but it's more or less up to Alexis, so convince her. All right, so where were we? Yes. So you're an aspirant, your final test, drink from the Cup of the Wulfen, absorb the Canis helix into your body. What does the Canis helix do in your body? Well, so the Canis helix involves both strengths and weaknesses. Some consider it a flaw, but basically what it does is it gives you extremely sharp senses, your eyesight, your sense of smell, particularly. All of your senses become more enhanced. Space Wolves have the sharpest senses of all the Space Marine chapters. Their senses are sharper than pretty much, I would estimate their senses are sharper than any transhuman except the Custodes. I would argue Custodes probably have similar or on par senses to a Space Wolf. But Space Wolves have extremely strong senses. It makes your skin as tough as leather, and your teeth become fangs that are capable of ripping. A Space Wolf can literally bite someone and rip through the power armor with their teeth. So those are like the good benefits of the Canis helix. However, it's also extremely unstable, and it can mutate you in some very bizarre fashions. There are legends that say that the Canis helix transforms you into monsters, which is essentially what Wulfen are. So there's a strong connection between Canis helix and Wulfen. There's also lore that suggests and implies that there's no wolves native to Fenris, which again suggests and implies, without coming out and saying it, that the wolves we see on Fenris, because there definitely are wolves on Fenris, are not in fact wolves, but are aspirants who drank from the Canis helix and mutated into a wolf or a thunder wolf. There's the really, really big ones. Things of that nature. It is only ever implied. I don't think it's ever come out and said for sure that this is how it goes, but this is what the implications are. And I certainly, my headcanon is that's if you meet a wolf on Fenris, that used to be an aspirant who drank from the Cup of the Wulfen. So after you drink from the Cup of the Wulfen, they take you through this thing called the Gate of Morkai. Morkai is in Fenrisian myth the god of the dead, the wolf that guards the door between our world and the underworld. And through this gate, the aspirant, they scan them. what do they call those guys? The rune priests. Their librarians kind of scam them, make sure they don't have any corruption in their spirit before they're sent out. And then they're sent out through the gate. And when they leave the gate, they are on the slopes of the Fang. They're on that one landmass that's always constant on Fenris, but they're out in the wilderness by themselves, alone. No, nothing. They don't have anything. They're basically just have their themselves, and they have to survive, and they have to return. And if they survive their journey and return through the gate, then they're considered okay, and they join the Space Wolves. But a lot of people don't make it. The Canis Helix, after they sip from it, their body starts to mutate a little bit. It starts to, they have these visions. They get, they feel like they're nauseous. They can't really see real well, stuff like that, until their senses tighten up. It's a transition process with the Canis Helix. And the reason Space Wolves do this is they want to make sure that before you become a full Space Marine, you can handle the bestial side of being a Space Wolf. Because with the Canis Helix raging in you, you are extremely aggressive. You are extremely feral, is one word, like bestial. Like you act more on instinct than you do on logic. Now, the aspirants that survive this process, some of them are never seen again. Some of them just run off into the wilderness, and in the night you hear their howls, and the legend of the Wulfen is that these creatures just roam in packs out there in Fenris. But some do return. Some manage to master themselves, master the Canis Helix and the changes wrought upon their body. They return to the Fang, and they become full Space Marines. And this is how Space Wolves recruits do their thing. So what does this have to do with Wulfen? Well, there's a thing called the Curse of the Wulfen. Again, it's related to the legend. It's related to the stories of these guys that never come back. But during times of great stress, great strain, or exposure to events like warp storms and the warp, their bodies can spontaneously mutate and become these werewolf-like creatures. Now, what's interesting is that this is not a permanent transformation. Sometimes it's temporary. Sometimes it's like, okay, you can kind of go Wulfen and you can come back. And the Space Wolves generally know, like, that this is a thing, but they don't let outsiders have this information at all, that sometimes their guys become werewolves. It happened fairly frequently before Lehman Russ joined their legion. Once he did, the presence of a Primarch can kind of sometimes alleviate and stabilize the flaws in the gene seed. So while Lehman Russ was with the Space Wolves, it did hardly ever happen. In fact, we're going to talk about the one time when it happened a lot with him. But for the most part, after that point, it was a very rare occurrence in the chapter to have someone go full Wulfen. This is related to a legend from when Lehman Russ first was working with his legion. He had a member of his bodyguards, the Wolf Guard, called Wulfen. That, according to some legends say, there was a guy named Wulfen, and he didn't really like Lehman Russ. Like, he was kind of jealous of him and things. So when he drank from the cup that all the other guys drank from, because all of Lehman Russ's bodyguards, even though they were full-grown adults and in some cases old men, demanded to join him when the Great Crusade began. So the majority of people who become Space Marines have to be adolescents. That's really the only way it works with any certainty. The older you get, the harder it is to go through the process to become Space Marine. And I believe, my understanding is that process is now, it's been lost. Like, only during the Great Crusade era could you have adults transition into Space Marines, and after that it had to be adolescents. So Lehman Russ had like 100 guys who were his closest bodyguards on Fenris. When the Emperor lifted him up to become to join his legion, he said, "Okay, you 100, you can come with me." And they said, yes, we will. And they were warned, like, most of you are going to die. Out of that 100, only 20 survived. And one of these guys, the guy named Wulfen, according to legend, when he drank, he transformed into a horrible monster and attacked Layman Russ, who had to put him down, which is where this name gets associated with the Canis Helix and gets associated with the transformation into a beast, if you will. So this Canis Helix can express itself as a werewolf-like transformation. And that's why the guy asked a question earlier about the wolf priests. As long as you have the Canis Helix, yes, you have the potential. The curse of the Wulfen is in you. That means anybody, any space wolf, anywhere, under the right circumstances, he could roll a 1 on his D20 and transform into a Wulfen. And it has happened. It has happened throughout their history. It just, most of the time, it gets covered up and people don't talk about it to outsiders. I'm going to select a couple of super chats. Boom. Ricky Chapman, 3377. Thank you, sir. We found some of the 13th Company in our tabletop role-playing game campaign, and we caught them using a Rubric Marines armor as bait. Oh, nice one. And delivered them home as a rogue trader that specialized in big game. Did you sell them off to be hunted? We knew the wolves and we were happy to help. It sounds like they ended up back on Fenris, which is good, I guess. But the idea of a rogue trader who just wants to hunt some really dangerous game, that could happen. And we also have Nils Andre. Thank you, sir. Just want to say Merry Christmas. Thanks for the streams. Bro, you're welcome. I'm so excited and happy to be doing this. Question, have you played Darktide? Yes, I have. If so, what's your thoughts on what class is your favorite? So I haven't played in a while. I played last year. I really liked it. One of my friends, Sarah Cockwell, she wrote a lot of the barks that the characters say. And I love how much lore and story comes out in just the little things that each of the characters say. It was one of my favorite bits. My favorite class at the time was the Zealot. I like to run around with a hammer and just bash people in the head. But I only ever tried Zealot and Guardsman, so I would like to try more classes to find out, but that's what I think. And then we've got a comment from Rush 2129. Rush's album 2112 is actually an important thing to me, so that's kind of interesting. Merry Christmas. My headcanon is that Logan Grimnar and 12 Thunderwolves visit every loyalist boy, girl, and non-binary tonight every year. He is a busy dog. Logan Grimnar as 40K Santa. I like that. I actually really dig that. Ricky Chapman 3377 says, should have mentioned that they are feral and half mad, attacking almost anything. So here's what's interesting. The Wulfen that are actual Space Marines that become Wulfen, they are very aggressive and bloodthirsty, but they still follow orders and they can still use guns. And that's really important because there's a contrast between them and the flesh change to the Thousand Sons, where those are almost different things. Like the Thousand Sons, when they're flawed, because they also have genetic flaw that can mutate them into horrible things. When they become a flesh changed monster, that is what you're talking about. They will attack anything. Whereas the Wulfen are more disciplined. Wulfen will follow orders. They can enact strategic plans. They can even communicate. Like they're just more space wolves in a lot of ways. They're not super crazy. However, there was one event, and we're going to talk about that, where they were a little more like what you're describing, a little more crazy and slaughter happy. So we will talk about that. Dowie Forever says, bring back Wolf Slay. All right, cool. So the ones that don't survive the transformation, they're out there in the woods running around as packs. Maybe they're turning into wolves. That's fine. The ones that do survive becoming a full Space Marine and do become a Wulfen, this was a thing that was happening even during the Great Crusade. And quietly, a lot of the guys that had this problem, that bore the curse of the Wulfen, they were gathered into the 13th Company. So one of the reasons why the 13th Company is very highly associated with Wulfen is because a lot of the Wulfen come from their ranks. Not all. There are Wulfen, again, like any Space Wolf can become a Wulfen, but the majority of the ones at that time were gathered together into the 13th Company. So they're not mindless. They are mostly instinct driven, but can still fire weapons, follow orders. What Wulfen is generally stronger, tougher, and faster than a standard Space Marine. I imagine they have difficulty communicating. Like, I imagine they could probably do like the, click twice for yes, once for no kind of thing in their comms. But I don't think they could really I doubt they could give a Shakespearean sonnet or anything like that. I doubt they could. Maybe 1 or 2 syllable words is kind of what I'm imagining in my head, but they are still capable of communicating. It's just not great. Why aren't all Space Wolves? Well, why don't they love Wulfen if Wulfen are stronger, tougher, and faster? Well, they can't use all the same gear. With the Wulfen transformation actually ends up breaking the armor. In a lot of cases, they can't wear like shoes because their feet are all big and claw-like. They can't wear gloves. Their hands are all big and claw-like. And they seem to favor, like, again, because of their feral aggression, they favor getting into close combat. They favor getting in there, just ripping people apart. Hands and teeth, chain swords, pistols, knives. These guys, they like to get in there and fight. But you don't really see Wulfen carrying advanced weapons, and you definitely don't see them in like Terminator armor or anything more than like your standard Space Marine Mark 7 or Mark 8 armor. So let's show some pictures of the Wulfen. We'll show some pictures of the models. This is I want to warn you, they're not the prettiest of models. Okay. So this is what the 13th Company looked like at the end of 3rd edition, beginning of 4th edition. You can see the Chaos Space Marine power packs on them. You can see some other little bits and bobs from Chaos Space Marines that's been added to their, like, helmets have been added to their armor because, again, the idea that they were scavenging from Chaos Space Marines while in the warp. This is, pre-Primaris. And there's the original set of Wulfen minis. These boys aren't pretty at all. You can argue there's a case to be made. Like, I came to really like them, but at the same time, I can understand anybody who looks at these and goes, ugh. This was, the early 2000s. Games Workshop had not yet perfected its game of making sweet as hell looking minis. They could make some good minis, but I don't know. It didn't feel like they really put a lot of time into this one. Here's a couple of close-ups just so you can get an idea of what these look like, these early Wulfen. You can see the missing armor on his arm. You can see he's got no gloves because his hands are big and clawed. They're not wearing helmets because they're full-on Teen Wolf here. Dragon Magic 647 says, better than Bjorg Bearstruck. Yeah, I remember Bjorg Bearstruck. He was a bad model too. Whew. He was a bad model indeed. And here's the last image, probably one of the best images, where I like this guy in the front. He's holding a demonette's head in his hand, which is kind of awesome. So that's kind of the best I think you can get with the old models. And here's the new boys. Here's the ones that came out in 2016. I am not a fan of this model. I think these guys look kind of silly. This feels to me like a try-hard metal band more than Space Wolves. But you know what? They're not god-awful. And I actually have something to back this up. Yeah, Mr. Longlegs, Mornington Crescent says. Yep, there he is right in front. There is an image I can provide to back this up from Warhammer Community. This guy did a paint job. Before I get into that, here's the official artwork of the Wulfen. And this guy's got power claws. So, I was saying earlier that they don't really use a lot of advanced gear. They still don't, but this is one of the ones that is capable of using more advanced gear. Although he's wearing even less armor than some of the other guys. All right, so here's the really nicely painted 13th Company squad from Warhammer Community. I like this. Is those earlier guys we saw? I wasn't a fan, but this actually looks pretty rad. I dig this quite a bit. And this is what the Space Wolves look like during the Heresy, because that's what we're going to talk about next. First of all, notice the paint scheme, the storm gray instead of the light baby blue. I kind of prefer the storm gray, I got to be honest. And I love the wolf pelt hanging off the shoulder. This is Mark II armor, I believe, which is why it's got that shovel-like faceplate on it. So I'm going to go ahead and drop those out for now. And let's talk about the 13th Company in the Horus Heresy, because this is where they get their first origins that were known. I'm presuming you guys may know about the Horus Heresy Black Books. These were the first big set of narrative that fleshed out the Horus Heresy as an event. There were, I think, 12 of them, and they were written by one of the best writers ever for Games Workshop, a guy called Alan Bly, who is unfortunately passed on. R.I.P. Alan. He was one hell of a dude. I got to meet him a couple times. He did a lot of work for me on Dark Heresy and Rogue Trader and Death Watch. Him and John French were just fantastic writers. And they collaborated on a lot of stuff. And right after they worked on a lot of Dark Heresy stuff, Alan and John went to different places in Games Workshop and started doing things. So John eventually ended up as head of licensing, and Alan did a lot of writing for the Forge World books. And this is where we get the first big expansion of the narrative of the Horus Heresy. And in the book that covers the Battle of Prospero, which is awesome. And we are going to do a whole episode on the Battle of Prospero because it's a big deal and there's a lot going on there. The short version is Magnus the Red, who was the Primarch of the Thousand Sons. He and his legion had been told not to use their psychic powers anymore after an event called the Edict of Nicaea. And Magnus was, he thought he knew better. He thought he knew better, and he decided to warn the Emperor about Horus's treachery by astrally projecting himself back to Terra, and in doing so caused a massive calamity at the Imperial Palace because the Emperor was setting up his Webway project. Again, it's very complicated. The short version is Magnus screwed up by forcing his way into the Imperial Palace as a psychic presence to try and warn the Emperor of what was happening. And the Emperor was like, oh, Jesus, like, you screwed everything up. And you disobeyed my direct order to not do this anymore. So the Emperor wrote out a writ of censure against Magnus and the Thousand Sons and dispatched orders to Layman Russ to take the Space Wolves, a bunch of Sisters of Silence, a bunch of Psi Titans, those are awesome, and we'll talk about them at some point, and a bunch of Custodes with him to go to Prospero, which is the home world of the Thousand Sons, capture Magnus, and bring him back to Terra for a scolding, essentially, for censure, to be told you screwed up. That was the deal. That's what the order said. Horus got in the way. Horus was like, hey, Layman Russ, I know you hate Magnus, and he and his legion, there's no saving them. What you should really do is, instead of capturing Magnus, you should just kill him. You should kill him and everyone on Prospero. You should just utterly destroy and wipe out an entire legion because they are too dangerous. And Layman Russ was not a fan of Magnus. It's easy. It's a fun thing. That's a short version. They did not get along. So he was kind of inclined to overstep his orders anyway. But Horus, being Horus, was extremely charismatic and extremely able to sway people with very good arguments, and he was the war master. Like he had a level of authority below the emperor, but still a pretty good amount of authority. So Laymanus was like, okay, yeah, sounds like a good plan. And he went to Prospero and launched an attack intending to wipe out everyone. I'm going to read some comments here. Aren't all Space Marines want to be rock band? Well, except in Ultramarines, they are boy bands for sure. There is a lot of heavy metal influences on 40K, and at some point I'd really like to talk about that. Mornington Crescent, Magnus did nothing wrong. Meme. So here's the thing, guys. I understand why this is a thing, and it is funny, but it's also technically a Hitler reference, because there's guys that say Hitler did nothing wrong and they just adapted it for Magnus did nothing wrong. So like, I would prefer if we kept that off this channel. Not a Hitler fan. So there's that. Morning to Chris says, I could do this all day. Stop posting links. Warning. Professor Shapp goes, as the joke goes, Magnus was told to do nothing and he did nothing wrong. I admire the humor and the wordplay there. I get that. Morning to Sarah says that wasn't a link. I guess he's talking about his previous comment, but okay. Steven Roy says, stop dropping in the midst of some Christmas parties, y'all rock. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you. Okay, so the Space Wolves, Sisters of Silence, Side Titans, but mostly the Space Wolves attack Prospero and just slaughter their way through the city. There's only one city on Prospero, to be clear. And at the end, at the final stages of this battle, the Thousand Sons just started cutting loose. They were like, we're going to get killed anyway. We might as well just use our psychic powers to their fullest extent. We've been holding back for so long. Magnus had taught them all these structures and enumerations and different methods to channel the warp safely, right? Because the warp is dangerous. The more you deal with it, the more it can grow out of control. But the Thousand Sons were at their most desperate hour, and they were like, you know what? We're just going to cut loose. We're going to forget all the restrictions. And they started blasting. Danny DeVito meme. And then I started blasting. These guys went crazy. And when they did this, they did it so hard and so well that it created a kind of localized warp storm over Prospero, over the city. And the effects of this, it was like an etheric wave that spread out across the whole battlefield. I said earlier that the Thousand Sons have their own genetic flaw and that they can spontaneously mutate into creatures called flesh changed. Well, this wave caused a shitload of them to transform into these horrible abominations, tentacled creatures that could not discern friend from foe and were rampaging about. The Thousand Sons actually tried to kind of use these guys like shock troops to sort of herded them towards the Space Wolves in a lot of cases. But the wave also affected the Space Wolves and transformed a large number of them transformed into Wulfen. And this is the moment. We were talking about this earlier. This is when the Wulfen were the most aggressive, the most bloodthirsty, the most feral. They were not the typical Wulfen, which is again like just kind of like a more aggressive Space Wolf. These were definitely more berserkers. There are some stories that they may have, gone a little out of control, but by and large, the Space Wolves kind of knew how to deal with this. And Wolf Priests are a great example. Wolf Priests are the chaplain equivalent in the Space Wolves. They also kind of act like apothecaries. And the Wolf Priests were the ones who they'd also keep all the records and history of the Legion at the time, chapter nowadays. So the Wolf Priests were able to kind of put some discipline and control into the Wulfen to keep them from going completely nuts. And so all this is happening. It's such a big mess, actually. the reality itself, the book describes that reality itself was rent asunder. And time was mutable. You had accounts from people during this battle where they saw people die and then saw those people again later alive. Like, time was weird. There's a bunch of different records of what happened in the battle, but the only one that people really give any credit to at all is the one written by Janicia Kroll, who was the head of the Sisters of Silence. As a null, she was the most unaffected by all the warp trickery going on. And so her account is the one given the most credit. But let's just say nobody really knows for certain what exactly happened at the final end of the Battle of Prospero, except when it was all over, Magnus vanished, 20,000-ish of the Thousand Sons vanished, and the planet was essentially abandoned by the Legion, by Magnus and his Thousand Sons. But in the aftermath, they found that the 13th Company had simply gone missing. There are accounts and stories that say the Thousand Sons were fleeing, and there were groups that didn't just vanish. There were some scattered bands of Thousand Sons that did have to physically flee and try to get to the spaceport and take off. And some accounts claim that the 13th Company was given the task of pursuing the Thousand Sons and did into the warp, through the warp portals, into the Eye of Terror, to what destination we don't know. But we do know that at the end of that battle, they were gone. They vanished into thin air. Oh, let's read a couple of super chats. Let's see. So I read this one, read that one. Here we go. Stephen Lucas, 8836. I think the faux Space Marine was augmented equivalent surgery instead of using Marine G-Seed, Luther and Corferin. So Luther and Corferin are examples of adults in the Heresy era who were transformed into equivalents of Space Marines. If they were, Corferin is a really good example. Like, he was decrepit. I mean, he wasn't just old; he was decrepit. And his Space Marine transformation made him. I mean, if I remember right, he basically has to wear Terminator armor in order to get around. He's just so messed up, and it's not fully. Like, he's just not as awesome as a typical Space Marine is. So it's a good point. You are describing, the process to transform a adult into a Space Marine is a very distinctly different one than all the other types of Space Marines. And I wouldn't use the term faux Space Marine because they are technically a full Space Marine, but a complete Space Marine is what I'm trying to say. But I think you're on the right track here, that they are distinct and different. And that's still true of the guys that Layman Russ transformed, one of whom we're going to talk about later. All right, so let's see here. Got another couple down here. Korinshima 3912. Hey, I remember you, sir. Good to see you back. Does the Crusade really need a War Master at this point? Yes, it did. I feel like appointment of a War Master is unnecessary. Like, who could stop them after Eleanor? All right. So this is going to be a deep dive a little bit. I'm going to try to keep it brief. The Great Crusade was largely composed of what are called expeditionary fleets, which are a large number of ships that take all the logistics. They have Mechanicum at the time. It would be Mechanicum, not Adeptus Mechanicus. Mechanicum vessels to repair everything. They've got tender vessels to move around all the ammunition and the tanks and the material. They have at the time Imperial Army or Imperial Militia or Solar Auxilia. So these fleets were massive, and they had dozens of ships. And while the Primarchs were largely in charge of these, some of these fleets were commanded by humans. Some of the fleets were commanded by different guys who had been given an expeditionary fleet as like a bonus from Terra or from their actions during the Unification War. It was a great honor to command an expeditionary fleet. But there was politicking, and there was jockeying for position, and there were a lot of different agendas. When the Emperor was in charge, it was pretty simple to say, okay, but the emperor wants it this way, therefore you're going to do it this way. There had to be some sort of central authority for the Great Crusade, or otherwise it would just, well, even the emperor had problems when he was in charge. It wasn't proceeding fast enough, or they weren't doing it right, or they were doing it in a way that was counterproductive towards conquering the galaxy. That was the ultimate goal of the Great Crusade, was conquer the galaxy. So the emperor, after Eleanor, needed to go back to Terra because he was working on his Webway project, and he couldn't. There are some sources that suggest he literally couldn't go any further away from Terra and still maintain the Astronomicon, which was necessary for interstellar travel. So the emperor appointed Horus as War Master at Eleanor, and then went back to work on his stuff. And the reason why he appointed Horus as War Master is so that there would be a central authority, somebody to kind of take the reins and keep the Great Crusade on track. Because again, there was a lot of egos, a lot of agendas that otherwise would have been advanced. So yes, they did need a War Master. I understand though that there weren't that many. Like by the time post Eleanor, there just isn't any major threat, right? Like it's just how many worlds can we conquer and how fast can we do it? So you have a point in that the War Master doesn't seem as necessary, but I assure you it was. All right. And then we have Bronze Scorpion. Do you want Layman Russ to return to 40K? Yes, I do. Why? Yes or no? Why do I want him back? Because Layman Russ is awesome. He's just a fascinating character. He's got a great history. He's got a great personality. He's got the conflict between his chapter and other parts of the Imperium. Like one of the most fascinating things about the return of Guilliman was seeing how he reacted to what the Imperium had become. And I would really like to see Layman Russ do that. Layman Russ, for people who don't know, and his Legion during the Horus Heresy, their role was as the Emperor's executioner. He would send them to enforce orders. If, for example, if a Great Crusade fleet got out of hand and wasn't doing it right, he would typically send the Space Wolves to deal with the problem. There are sources that suggest that Layman Russ and the Space Wolves may have been the ones that eradicated the two missing legions. So I'd love to have him come back just to shed some light on all the very interesting stuff, and that his perspective would be really interesting to hear from. Plus, there's the legend of the Wolf Time, which is when he will return, and it seems likely that right now the Era Indomitus might be the Wolf Time. So yes, I'd love to have him come back. Also, if the Lion's around, I'd love to see the Lion and Layman Russ interact now, because yeah, they're rivals. Okay. Professor Shapp says, I keep forgetting that Prospero was abandoned. My head keeps saying it's blown up like some of the other Primarch worlds. It was not blown up. It was cleansed of the Thousand Suns and then abandoned. Nestor Vatumbra. I love the Space Wolves Berserker illustrations for the Visions book. Yes, I have that. I have that behind me. The ones from the trading card game. To me, that's what the 13th Company should look like. If I remember right, those are the John Blanche pictures, and they do look pretty rad. Druzina Quaisian says, if the Thousand Suns turn into bird mutants and Space Wolves hunt them, does that make Space Wolves bird dogs? Very good. Very good. So, this is my roommate, Scott. Hi, Scott. Ross should start a channel named Layman Ross. Yes. Layman Ross would be my Primarch name. So we talked about them during the Heresy era. They vanished at the Battle of Prospero. What happened after the Heresy? Where does the 13th Company go after the Heresy? So we talked about the alt history bit. I'm not going to get into that again, but I will say that is post-Heresy. According to lore, the 13th Company is occasionally spotted during warp storms or battles that take place near warp space, like the Eye of Terror. And reports of these guys keep filtering back to Fenris over the years, over the centuries. Nestor Vatumbra, the ones from Adrian Smith. Yeah, okay. Apologies. Adrian Smith does have some really good art in that too. So these reports of seeing Space Wolves in battle keep filtering back to Fenris, and Fenris is like, hey, we don't have anybody out there. What does this mean? And over time, they start to realize that these reports of Space Wolves fighting in the warp, they have to be the 13th Company. So the legend starts to grow a little bit over time. And then we get the Battle of the Fang, which is where I spoke earlier about when Magnus and his boys attacked the Fang. It was this big deal. He killed the Great Wolf, and that's when they finally pulled the stone out of the Grand Annalus to put the black onyx stone in to represent the 13th Company. So post M32, so 2,000 years after the Horus Heresy, the Space Wolves kind of just are like, okay, those guys are gone. We're not getting them back. But they keep hearing stories and they keep getting reports. There's a really great William King book about Ragnar Blackmane encountering some of them, although that may or may not be canon anymore. But in the era Indomitus, Njal, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. I'm going to say Njal Stormcaller, who is the special character librarian. He's the rune priest of the Space Wolves, the head guy. He's the equivalent of Tigurius or Mephiston from the Ultramarines and the Blood Angels, respectively. He's their chief librarian. Njal Stormcaller basically has a vision and says, we have to go rescue the 13th Company. He gathers together a big group and they go out and they do it. And there's this, these are books, I think, from 2016 called The Hunt for the Wulfen, if I'm not mistaken. And when they go out and do this, they find a group of about 200 13th Company that have been fighting inside this prison or labyrinth or maze in the warp. It's a very strange construction. Some believe that Magnus had built it. And to the 13th Company, they'd been fighting on Prospero in the final battle this whole time, just completely unaffected by the passage of years. So they were shocked to discover that 10,000 years had gone by while they were doing this. And even more unusual, their commander was this guy called Bolvi Greybeard. So according to the records from the Horus Heresy, the guy in charge was a guy called Yoren Bloodhowl or Bloodfang. The names have changed. I think Bloodfang in the White Dwarf and maybe the second edition codex, and then Bloodhowl later. So Yoren Bloodhowl was supposed to be the guy in charge. Yoren, I'm going to say Yoren. But they found that Bolvi was now the Wolf Lord, the Jarl, according to the pre-heresy lexicon of the Space Wolves, was now in charge. And Njal Stormcaller led Bolvi and his guys back out of the warp, and they have since been scattered throughout the rest of the chapter. So why is Bolvi Greybeard so interesting? Bolvi Greybeard is one of those original 20 guys that survived being turned into a Space Marine at the dawn of the Great Crusade. Bolvi Greybeard literally fought next to Elaman Russ, has met the Emperor. He's older than Bjorn. Bjorn Fellhand. Bjorn the Fell-Handed. And he's possibly the oldest living person in all of Warhammer 40K besides the Emperor. Or possibly Constantine Valdor would be older if he returns. If Constantine Valdor returns, I'll say he's the oldest. But Bolvi may be one of the oldest, if not the oldest, people in all of 40K. He's been around a long, long time. So that's why Bolvi Greybeard is kind of wild to have successfully navigated all that time with these people. And that's where I think the lore basically comes to an end in the era Indomitus, is with Bolvi and his guys getting rescued. Long journey to get here. I apologize. So what is going to happen from here? Like, where did the 13th Company go from this point? That's, I think, the next question I'd like to tackle. Professor Schaap says, gee, Emperor, what do you want to do this decade? The Emperor, same thing we do every decade, Horus. Try to take over the galaxy. Yes, very Pinky in the Brain. I love it. And Trazina Quaison, Lion, is there nothing in this millennia that is not worse than the previous? Layman Rush shows up. That would change a lot of that. All right. So post-era Indomitus 13th Company. So they do exist. They're back. Ish. I would love to see a formation for 10th edition where they do like a 13th Company sub army. That'd be pretty awesome. With Wulfen, things of that nature. In the 3rd edition codex, when they had their own entry in the Black Crusade book, they had bikes, like 2 different types of infantry, wolf lords, wolf priests, rune priests, and they had packs of Fenrisian wolves. They were the first guys who could actually field Fenrisian wolves as a unit. They were freaking awesome in 4th edition. I played that army so much. I actually wrote a tactica for Bolter and Chainsword. I think you could probably find it on Bolter and Chainsword somewhere from 4th edition. It's a tactica for how to play 13th Company. Because they were a get into your face. They were essentially Space Marine orcs. They would just get into your face. They'd charge you. They would annihilate you in close combat. They didn't have any long-ranged weapons. They didn't have any tanks, dreadnoughts, etc. But they were a really sweet-ass army. And a lot of fun to paint and model. I did my first hand-painted banner. I did my first major conversions of characters. I actually started to make like a biker squad and ended up, that's when my interest petered out a little bit, unfortunately, but I had plans to do a whole biker squad and stuff. These guys were great. Quick note here, Kurinshima 3912 says, so Dante is a fraud. Dante is the longest lived Space Marine consecutively. Like if you just add up all the years he was active as a Space Marine, he's been active as a Space Marine longer than anybody else, to my knowledge. Longer than Gilliman. Gilliman was only around 200 or 300 years. So like Dante is like the longest lived Space Marine, but the guys like Bolvi, Admiral Spire is also a dude who has been alive a hell of a long time because he was lost in the warp. And there's been guys who've been stuck in stasis for like 6,000 years. So there's ways to kind of time skip in 40K, and Bolvi and his boys, they time skipped from the beginning to the current. Like they missed everything in between. Chronologically, he's older, and the reason why that's interesting to me is because he's seen things that are only legends in the Era Indomitus. He's literally been there, seen them, heard them, witnessed them. Before him, Bjorn the Fell-Handed was considered like this because Bjorn had been around with Layman Russ and the Emperor and was still active, but he was put to sleep and woken up every so often. So again, he missed a lot of that time. So by a certain point of view, Dante is the oldest, longest lived Space Marine. But it's just depends on how you track time. And then Mechanical Beanstalk had to leave chat when you were talking about pseudo marines. Do you have any thoughts about their continued existence in 40K? If the tech exists to make the pseudo marines, does that open up the possibility of more human-like antagonists that could stand up to marine? Possibly. I love the idea that tech is still out there. I love the thought of it. Oh man, you know what would be rad is if somebody did find that and took like a whole planet and turned them into the pseudo marines. Or even crazier, if you can find the tech for Thunder Warriors and make a shitload of Thunder Warriors, or maybe both. Why not both? Porque no los dos. You could have massive groups of augmented humans running around. The Imperium has so much technology to augment humanity, from cybernetic conversion to genetic. There's the guys called the Gland Warriors. Look them up for the Astra Militarum or the Imperial Guard. Genetic stuff to, full-on transhumanism. There's just a lot of different ways you can become way more human than human, as the old song would say. There's a lot of ways to do it. And it'd be really fascinating. Call is old as well. Yeah, Call is definitely he's definitely one of the oldest guys, and he lived that time. Although with Call, he's got those different brains and different mindsets. Like It's arguable whether the call we know now is the same as the call that existed back then. Still, good point. He is definitely one of the oldest people, along with Bolvi and some of the others. Okay, yeah. Fabius Bile proves. Yes, thank you, Professor Shapp. He would definitely, the Gene Father would be all about that. So I imagine of those 200 guys they rescued, some of those dudes probably crossed the Rubicon and became Primaris Marines. It is not crazy to imagine that they would reform the 13th Company with some of the unnumbered sons. I would love to see, again, I'd love to see them come back as a force. Maybe instead of Primarising them, they'll give us a entirely firstborn force. That would be a lot of fun. But also, I'm curious to see what a Primaris Wulfen would look like. Some of the things we know about the Primaris is that when they were first introduced, Call assured everybody, like, hey, they're good. I removed all the problems. They're fine. But the Blood Angels soon found out that that was not, in fact, true, that they still had all the flaws of their original gene seed. If you're an unnumbered son who joined the Space Wolves, I am not sure if you've drank from the Canis Helix or not. I assume that's, Call is pretty thorough, so I would have to assume that's part of the process, because they are in every other way identical to a Space Wolf, right? Like they're just the ones that he created in his lab, before to give to all the different people during the Dominus Crusade. So can a Primaris Marine become a Wulfen? I would love to find out. I want to know, and I want to see what a Primaris Wulfen would look like, because I think Games Workshop has the capability to do some really awesome looking werewolf Marines, unlike the earlier attempts. I do love some of those models, but they are ugly. Anyway, yeah, I'd love to see what Primaris Wulfen look like. I think that'd be pretty rad. If there are Primaris Wulfen, then the question becomes, is there a step up from a Thunderwolf? Does the Primaris, thing, does that apply to the further mutations? See, Wolf in general they're really bizarre, because they are essentially a sanctioned, quote unquote, mutant Space Marine. There's reasons why the Space Wolves tend to keep that as much of a secret as they possibly can. Again, because of the Battle of Prospero, we know that there are records of the Wulfen. Like the Custodes certainly know, the High Lords of Terror probably know, Sisters of Silence, any dreadnought that came from that time period, they would probably know that, yeah, there's Wulfen exists, they're a thing. But by and large, most people are ignorant of this fact. I imagine there's some Inquisitors out there who have probably uncovered it. But it would be interesting to see if the Space Wolves go more open with it or not. So Hawk is asking, would a Wulfen dreadnought be possible? Certainly, if you have done the Canis Helix, if you've supped from the cup of Wulfen and gone out through the Gate of Morkai and come back, yeah, it's in you. It's in you, even if you are a limbless body in a sarcophagus inside a dreadnought. I want to say, wasn't there a model that was like a maybe not a full-on Wulfen? No, there is. There is a Wulfen dreadnought. I'll be damned. Yeah, they made a model for one. Let's see if I can. Let me see if I can give you guys an image of what it looks like, because it is something to see. Yeah, Wulfen dreadnoughts do exist. And sharing the screen. Let me make that a bit bigger. How's that? Can you guys see that? That is a Wulfen dreadnought. So some of you might be asking what those weird claws are, because they look kind of like ice. The Space Wolves have frost blades. They have a means of forging power weapons that makes them look kind of like ice. And they're typically stronger than a standard power weapon of the same kind. Yeah, look, this This guy's face is just absolutely wild. He's got a little teen wolf face stuck in the middle of his sarcophagus there, and he doesn't look too happy. But yeah, you'll notice that the rest of his he does, although he has bones on top here, he is in a pretty standard Castroferum or box knot style dreadnought. Like not much else has changed or mutated. Murder Fang, yes, thank you. Clotted one, yeah, that's Murder Fang. That's what they call him. I mean, he sounds like a Metalopocalypse band member. But yeah, he's Murder Fang. So let me just make sure I've got any other notes on these guys. So what do you guys think about 13th Company? Are you fans? Do you think they're interesting? Do you think they're cool? There's mysteries that are yet to be uncovered. What happened to Jordan Bloodfang? Where's the rest of the 13th Great Company? Because it's not just 200 guys. There was like 12,000 Marines that went missing at the end of Prospero. Did more come to join them during the Battle of the Fang, as some legends and stories say? Maybe. I'm curious to find out what happened. How were they able to survive? Who built the maze that they were found in? Can Games Workshop make an actually good werewolf miniature? These are all questions I would like to be answered. I would like to believe that the rest of the 13th Company, or more 13th Company, is still out there in the Eye of Terror, either searching for or have found Layman Russ and are fighting at his side. That's my headcanon, is that they're out there fighting the good fight and hanging out with Layman Russ himself, waiting for the wolf time for when they will return. There is a prophecy actually about these guys. Let me see if I can find it. The 13th Company, it's not the right one. 13th Company there's prophecies about the wolf time that reference them. The wolf time is a legend for the Space Wolves chapter that says when the galaxy is at its darkest hour, this is the wolf time. This is when Layman Russ will return. And the prophecy says, yeah. So, I almost forgot. There was a successor chapter, like one of the few successor chapters of the Space Wolves, was one called the Wolf Brothers. Hang on, I'm getting a message. Okay, got that. The Wolf Brothers. The Wolf Brothers, a lot of them went Wulfen as well. So an awful lot of Wulfen went over there. Guys, if I'm missing any comments from Twitch or anything like that, please let me know. Usually Alexis handles this for me, so I may be missing some participation, and I just don't want to make sure I don't miss it. Anyway, so the Wolf Brothers were a successor chapter, one of the very few, and it didn't last very long. they didn't hang around a lot. But so around M37, so about 3,000 to 4,000 years before the era Indomitus, there's a saga of the Space Wolves where they see the Wolf Brothers chasing Eldar into the webway and never returning, which is, I think, what happened to Khan of the White Scars as well. I think Jagatai Khan chased Eldar into the webway and was never seen again. And this the saga has a prophecy that they would return, that they would come back at some point. The Wulfen were never seen nor heard from again, passing into the void and becoming lost to the eye and ear of man. It is said upon the Space World's homeworld of Fenris that the loss of the Wulfen was known by the wolves of Asaheim. Asaheim is that continent where the Fang is located. The great packs gathered before the gates of the Space Wolves monastery at their thousands until every wolf in the world was there. That great gray host howled their loss for 100 nights before returning to the hinterlands. I mean, maybe. The sagas and legends of the Space Wolves are pretty interesting stuff, but it's important to remember that the Space Wolves like to look like barbarians. They like to pretend that they're barbarians. They put all these skulls and wolf tails on their armor. They inscribe runes on all their gear. They give off the pretense of being uncivilized, unlearned, brute force barbarians, but in truth, they're very cunning. They're very smart. They think about everything logically. And this is passed down from Layman Russ, who, it's better to be underestimated, so a lot of their traditions and beliefs kind of revolve around this deception of being barbarians. Although, that it's important to remember that was established a long, long time ago. That was established 10,000 years before the current date. So over time, how much of that pretend became real? It's a question. Anyway, so let's read a couple comments here. Drazina Quaison says, I love them. Hey, me too. My custom chapter has gene seed from them. They ran across them during a campaign, and now we have werebears and werewolves. Lunar White Fox asks, what is the reason in real life why Space Wolves have so few chapters? Is it because it's creatively difficult to create episodes within the wolf theme without being redundant, or are there other reasons? Okay, so this is, I can speculate. I don't know the specific answer, but I can definitely speculate. The Space Wolves as a chapter were one of the largest chapters pre-Era Indominus. They were one of the biggest Space Marine chapters. They had thousands, tens of thousands of Space Marines, where most chapters were limited to 1,000. And they had been at odds with the Inquisition many times throughout their lifetime. I would speculate that they didn't really need successor chapters because each great company was essentially a chapter. They decided to participate and try it out, and it didn't go so well with the Wolf Brothers, and they were like, maybe not for us. But two, I think the follow-up is that they just wanted to avoid getting the wrong kind of attention. Space Marines have a lot of autonomy. They are self-sufficient. Each chapter is essentially self-sufficient. And they don't generally have to bow to the high authorities of the Imperium very often. They generally get to do whatever they want. But that can change, and it can change in a heartbeat if the Inquisition especially decides that you're not doing it right. So I believe that one of the Wolf Lords, or maybe the Great Wolf, who's the one in charge of the chapter, I think he probably came to a decision at some point and said, we're not going to draw the Inquisition's ire, because they can just, they have the power to destroy us, and we don't want to be destroyed. So that's my belief of why they don't have very many successor chapters. Yeah, the Wolf Brothers are kind of interesting because they're like the 13th Company in that they had a lot of Wulfen and vanished during a battle. I suspect there's just so many legends and stories that some of them kind of blend and grow together over time. Kind of like, it's Christmas. We could think about Santa Claus. Santa Claus is a collection of a dozen different stories, St. Nicholas, Father Christmas, a lot of other beings, Krampus among them, that have been squished into one cohesive legend. So Santa Claus is a great example of how legends can flow together. Stories, different characters can become the same character. I have a feeling that the Wolf Brothers and what happened to them might be a reflection of what happened on Prospero. It might have been a real event, but it might also just be a story that people heard and were like, oh, that's the 13th Company, and they attached that to other things that happen in the lore. The 13th Company also had a unique psychic power when they had their own army list called Gate, where they could. Now this is also power in second edition, but as far as I can recall, it was the only time it showed up in third or fourth or fifth edition was as a power that the 13th Company Rune Priest could use to teleport across the the battlefield. And as you know, teleportation in 40K is very dangerous. It passes through the warp. It is teleportation. I say, as you know, you may not know. Teleportation in 40K is generally very dangerous because it usually involves a short passage through the warp itself. Eldar warp spiders have teleportation packs on their back. They teleport through the warp. Imperial ships have what are called teleportariums, which is like a transporter room from Star Trek. It's where you go to get teleported to someplace else. And it is generally very dangerous to teleport unless you have a homing device or a beacon to lock onto to teleport your guys to that particular pinpoint spot. So teleportation also passes through the warp, just like the Wolf Brothers went through the webway, and just like the 13th Company of Prospero probably vanished through a warp portal. Who knows? It's a dangerous and strange way to travel in 40K. Anyway, so what are some questions? Any questions you guys have about the 13th Company or the Wulfen or any of the things we've discussed so far? It's just one of my favorite bits. I'm a Space Wolf guy, and I love 13th Company. I just don't love the models. I really would love to love the models. They did a thing recently for Blood Angels in 10th edition where they have a Death Company like formation, and I was really excited by that. I was like, oh, I would love to play a Death Company army in 40K, and the fact that they're offering these slightly, subgroup specific formations is kind of interesting, and I'd really like to see that happen for maybe not this edition. I think I've heard a rumor that 10th edition is kind of coming to a close and there's a new edition on the horizon. I don't know if you guys know that. I don't know if you know the truth. It's just a rumor I've heard. So question from Drusina Quison: do they collect gene seed from the Wulfen? Yes, they do. The Wulfen still have all the Space Marine stuff. They have the black carapace. They have, you can argue that maybe they don't have the black carapace actually, because you can see their bare skin, their arms and legs and things like that are all furry, and maybe they don't have the black carapace. Maybe that's why their armor isn't as cohesive. That would be kind of an interesting way to go with that. But as far as I'm aware, they still have the progenoid glands, and they still have all the other implants that make Space Marines. So that'd be kind of wild, wouldn't it? Nestor Vitumbra: the High Lords Terra must propose and ratify each new founding. That's true. And the Wolves are so anti-authoritarian and unpredictable, also true, that I highly doubt Terra would be interested in that. I lent my speculation to this as that it's a planned thing, but it may not be. Maybe it is literally just politics, and the High Lords Terra and the Space Wolves, they find them to be a less than convenient tool, because they definitely are not big on authority. And Black Wolf 82, great picture there. So not all of the 13th Company is Wulfen. That's true. Absolutely true. 13th Company is not entirely Wulfen. They just have a lot of Wulfen, or a higher proportion than other companies. Do you think the non-Wulfen guys are like the ones they found in Ashes of Prospero? I believe is Ashes of Prospero where they found Bulvi, and is that the story of? I think that's where Nijal Stormcaller does his thing, is the book Ashes of Prospero. Would they be able to control or talk to the Wulfen easier? Probably. So Space Wolves, when they form, their squads are called packs. When they form a squad, those guys typically have a stronger bond than a lot of other Space Marine squads do, because they do a lot of things together. They fight together, just like all squads do, but they also they go drinking together, they go hunting together, they share stories. Space Wolves, at one time, I often like to say the Space Wolves are kind of the most human Space Marines, because they still remember how to have fun, unlike other chapters. But I have since revised that opinion. I think all chapters are more or less connected to humanity by what they do outside of fighting. But the Space Wolves do tend to socialize. One of the things they do outside of fighting is socialize. They entertain each other with stories. They hunt together. They have contests. That social aspect would certainly mean that a non-Wulfen 13th Company member would have a bond or a stronger connection to someone who succumbed to the curse of the Wulfen and became a werewolf. And it's important to remember that it is not a permanent effect. When you're Wulfen, you're not permanently Wulfen. You can transform back. My understanding is that's not common, that you're not locked into being a Wulfen, but it usually means you don't come back. That's my understanding from what I've read, from when I've spoke to Games Workshop about it. One of my last projects before coming to Lorebeards was a Post-heresy video game, and the Battle of Prospero was a very major part of that video game. So I spent a lot of time doing deep dives in lore about Prospero, about the Thousand Sons, Space Wolves, Custodes, Side Titans, Sisters of Silence. All of the characters and events during the Battle of Prospero. It's a huge, huge thing. And the Wulfen being exposed there is one of the most interesting parts of that to me. I am sure there are custodes on Terra who are like, yeah, this time I was on Prospero and like all these Space Wolves just turned into werewolves and flung themselves at the Thousand Sons, ripped them apart barehanded. That was something to see. So yeah, I expect they would have a closer entrance, closer connection to them than others. Hawk Oddly asks, do Space Wolves avoid the pseudoscience of alpha wolves? Yeah, the whole concept of alphas is not scientific. Look that up sometime. It's pretty interesting. The guy who even coined the term says it's not really a thing anymore. Generally, Space Wolves do. They get around this a lot by saying there are no wolves on Fenris, that the wolves that we travel with aren't really wolves, but they look like wolves, so they act like wolves. But they don't really, I mean, they don't go in for a lot of that alpha stuff, if that's what you're asking. Nestor Vitumbra says, I prefer the 13th Company not to be Primarist. I'm down with that. And instead be made up of elderly veterans with archaic equipment. Again, that would be very cool. There actually a lot of archaic equipment, a lot of stuff from the Post-heresy is better than what we have today. Call's improvements are very nice. Like the Primaris heavy bolt guns, heavy bolt rifles, I should say, and some of their other weapons are actually better than what they had in the Heresy. But during the Heresy, they had access to stuff that was pretty damn good. Disintegrators, you should look those up. Those are awesome and terrifying. Volkite weapons. I understand that Call made a new type of Volkite weapon. Volkite weapons essentially are like little heat rays, almost like death rays from War of the Worlds. They're crazy. And in the Heresy era, Volkite was a very, very dangerous weapon to have. So elderly veterans with archaic equipment could actually be pretty awesome. It may not be quite as awesome in my head as if Call has replaced all that stuff, but I don't think he has. I don't think there's disintegrators. Anyway, check out the new box for Horus Heresy Saturnine and the stuff that's in there. Wow, crazy. All right, so Jonathan King, 4923. Quick question about Space Wolves in general. What are their funerary rites like? How the salamanders have a ritualistic burning of the body and the branding of those who lower the body down. Ooh, good question. I would presume, speculation, because I don't know for sure, but speculation. I presume that they tend to follow the funerary rites of Fenris, which is based on Viking culture. So I would assume some kind of pyre or a boat pushed out in the middle of the lake and lit by a flaming arrow. Wouldn't be an arrow. It'd be probably a grenade or a bolt gun to light on a fire. I would imagine they burn their dead. That's what I think. Okay. And Professor Schaap, I can imagine maybe a nice conflict where there's an attempt to have the Primaris replace the 13th and the Space Wolves push back at wanting to preserve them. That would be a really interesting story. You can imagine that the Space Wolves, because the 13th Company has been a part of their chapter for so long, either as a legend or as a goal, like for Najal Stormcaller, or as a metaphor for all the missing renegade or destroyed companies, or squads, Space Wolves. You can imagine that tradition would be bone deep. And any attempt to form a new 13th Company of Primaris Marines might, that actually might explain a lot, Professor Schaap. I could see Logan Grimnar being reluctant to do that for that specific reason, for the reason of wanting to preserve the 13th Company as the place that it's held in their chapter for so long. But again, I'm really curious to see if Primaris can become Wulfen and what that would look like. So I'm kind of both minds about that. And Professor Schaap says, like a clash between new, streamlined, and stable versus old, traditional, and dependable. Well, yeah. The Space Wolves aren't like the Dawi, though. They're not saying it's good enough for my father and good enough for his father, and therefore it's good enough for me. Actually, Space Wolves are one of the ones that adopted new things more readily than many chapters, like the Predator Executioner, I believe. The one with the twin guns in the turret was one of their developments that the Mechanicus like eventually had to just say, okay, fine, you can have this and use it, even though it's new and crazy. And the Space Wolves have kept a lot of their gear from the heresy that other chapters simply don't have. What is that ship called? Flying Space Marine. It's got the twin rams in the front. What is that called? Can't remember. Anyway, they have a particular device that they use. Looking for the list of vehicles now that they use that most chapters don't have access to anymore. Kestis Assault Ram, that's what it's called. The Assault Ram. They have a lot of the Kestis Assault Rams because it was common during the Heresy era. Other chapters do have them, but I guess the Space Wolves just use it a lot. Anyway, they're okay with using old and new technology. And I mentioned that they have their own like types of power weapons and things of that nature that they just use because they like it better. And frankly, it is superior. So Druzina Quison says, Druzina Quison, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to say this a lot. I apologize. Druzina Quison says, I could see bog funerals for Wulfen, pyres for regular. So a bog funeral, is that, I presume that's where you're talking about they just throw them into the closest mud or quicksand and just ignore it. The bogs preserved a lot of ancient humans. That's where we get a lot of information on our ancestors is from guys that wandered into the bogs and were lost and got preserved under the mud. But anyway, yeah, 13th Company has been featured in a lot of articles, a lot of novels, including the William King one actually conflicts a little bit with some of the other texts, and the earliest like second edition codex, like I said, has a different name for Jordan Bloodhowl. This is definitely a piece of lore that's evolved and grown over time and has been fleshed out. It's been retconned at least a couple times. I don't know. It's a niche of a niche of a niche. Do you like Space Marines? Great. That's your first niche. Do you like Space Wolves? That's your second niche. And this is the third niche. So this is very, very, it is not a super common thing to walk around and be like, I'm a 13th Company stan. That's one of the reasons why I kind of like it. I feel like I'm a fan of an indie band or an underground movement. You know, it's something that not everybody is super into or super aware of. And that's one of the reasons why it's kind of cool. I have a shirt with the 13th Company emblem. I didn't wear it today because it's Christmas and I wanted to show off my Christmas sweater. But yeah, if you want to know more, one of the books they were in is called Wolf's Honor, written by Lee Leitner, which is actually a couple of people. It's one half of that is a friend of mine named Harry Heckel, and there's Harry Heckel and another guy, I forget the other guy, but they wrote together under the name Lee Leitner, and they wrote Wolf's Honor back in, that was a 2000s, I want to say pre-2010. And then they're in John French's Ahriman novels. They're all the Space Wolf Codexes mention them. There's one of the coolest things is check out Inferno, book 7 of the Horus Heresy Black Books, because that goes over them at pretty length. And then there was Warzone Fenris, Curse of the Wulfen. That was 2016, and they had a couple of little books about the hunt for the Wulfen there. And there's an audio drama called The 13th Wolf that has a lot of information on them as well. If you want to get more into that, go check out those books. 13th Company. I wish there was more. They just don't have very many models. They don't have a ton of lore in the widespread amount of codexes and things that are out there. So a lot of this is headcanon. A lot of this is speculation. A lot of it is just like, what would you like them to be? And that's one of the things that's great about 40K is they have a lot of these little bits and bobs, Harlequins, Solitaires, the Nova Terra Interregnum. I understand Adeptus Ridiculous just recently talked about that, Nova Terra Interregnum. There's just all these little things that are quite interesting as things you can glom onto and get a lot out of, even though there's just not a lot known about them. Nestor Vitumbra says an example of primarization gone weird might be Brand Redmoss Company, the modern Grand Company most affected by the Wulfen Curse. That's right. But I prefer the 13th to maintain a distinct identity. Me too. I would like them to be their own thing still. As much as I've talked about how interesting it would be to see a Primaris werewolf, I would also be fine if they kept them around as their firstborn. If you want to play Space Wolves and be firstborn, 13th Company. Here you go. That would be pretty rad. So I don't want to go too further down this road without we'd be speculating. I could say a lot of stuff about role-playing game 13th Company Wolves as well, and that would be kind of fun to get to. Got a super chat, Stephen Lucas 8836. Thank you, sir. And 11th, that's the upcoming, the next edition of 40K. Call needs to primarify the grav gun and upgrade the Neo Volkite pistol to a gun. Okay, so there's no Primaris grav weapons and there's no Primaris Volkite except from a pistol. That would be interesting. Might also make multi-build bike and hover bike squads while they're at it. So going back to the guy who's talking about making them a unit of veterans with archaic weapons, yeah, that's where you could straight up just bring in disintegrators and Volkites and all the other crazy stuff from the heresy, bring it in through the 13th Company, make that available. That would be super sweet. Horus Heresy has in that era, the weapons are awesome. There's so many cool little bits and bobs of weapons you can deploy. Rad grenades, which you could have in second edition, but have since been long absent from the game. Rad missiles, all kinds of weird flamers. The Salamanders have their own flamers. The Death Guard have what are called toxic flamers, or alchemical flamers. The Dark Angels have straight up chained AI robots called Exindios. It's pretty crazy. They have access to gear and weapons that is long gone. Like the Saturn Terminator armor and Saturn Dreadnoughts, they look awesome. The new editions, those look just really, really great. Black Wolf 82. I forget what Logan Grimnar's opinion is on the 13th. I know, like I know they're accepted. They were accepted, but is it more like keep it under wraps or seem more open about it? The existence of the 13th Company. Oh, sorry, I already read that one. The existence of the 13th Company is not a secret. Like Era Indomitus changed a lot of things for the Space Wolves. And at the end of the Battle of Acadia, I think they've been mostly wiped out. If I remember right, the Space Wolves are very, very badly hurt in terms of chapter strength after the Battle of Acadia. They lost a lot of their forces. So it's questionable, like even if these guys are even still around. But if they are, I don't see Grimnar hiding them. I don't see Grimnar saying they don't exist. I think with Gilliman's return, and now he's the authority in the Imperium, I would imagine that Grimnar would be less inclined to hide, less inclined to lie, less inclined to avoid attention because he doesn't have to anymore. I think with Gilman backing him up, and Gilman would back him up, he would probably largely stay immune from inquisitorial attention. Got a super chat. Stephen Lucas, wow, you're killing it today. Appreciate you. Silly in lore, they scaped 30K hover. They, I think, scrapped 30K hover bikes because of Eldar. In 30K, they did have a lot of jet bikes. The White Scars had a shitload of jet bikes. They were all about jet bikes. Grav vehicles in general were a lot more common in the Heresy era. And part of that is just technological stagnation over time. Like they just lost the ability to make it, maintain it. If I remember right, the Master of the Ravenwing rides a jet bike because it's like one of the last functioning ones that they have access to. And it's considered a relic of their chapter. So jet bikes were a very common thing and are no longer a thing. Is it because of the Eldar? I mean, you could make that argument that the Eldar are defined by having jet bikes and nobody else is, because both Asuryani and Drukhari, and actually, do Harlequins have jet bikes? I think they do. So all the different breeds of Eldar use jet bikes, and it is a very common thing for them. From a standpoint of someone who's like trying to sell models, you do want to keep factions distinct. That is just how it is. So I guess you could say that. Although Games Workshop has largely been really good at creating same but different for all the different factions. Like if you have a Dreadnought for the Space Marines, cool. I'm a guy wired into a suit that's big and strong and tough. And there's lots of variations. Space Marines have so many variations of Dreadnoughts. And we're not, and that's not even counting war suits like the Dread Knight or the Primaris one. But so all these different varieties, that's just one type of thing. Eldar also have Dreadnoughts. They're called Wraith Lords. They're completely different, but they serve the same general function, giant, big, stompy thing with guns. Chaos Space Marines just use a version of the Space Marine Dreadnought. Tau have their Riptide suits and their Crisis suits. My point I'm trying to get to is that Games Workshop's been largely good at making the same thing for everybody. But it's different enough to feel different enough. Maybe I do know that creative sometimes has issues at Games Workshop, like with the squats, they literally couldn't think of anything to do with them. That was told to me directly by Alan Merritt, saying that's why we got rid of the squats. Nobody had any ideas on where to go. So it's possible that they just haven't had the right idea to give everybody a jet bike, and it is just largely an Eldari thing, and they leave it alone with that. But I don't know. This is kind of turning into an AMA, and it's Christmas. Why not? I will give you the gift here, chat. I'm offering you. Ask me anything from this point on, and I will answer it. I'm happy to do that. Professor Shapp, Harlequins use Skyweavers, yeah. All the different breeds, as far as I'm aware, every faction of Eldar can use jet bikes, and probably does use jet bikes, because they're the kings of grav technology. All their tanks are grav tanks. All their bikes can hover. It makes sense because that's just a big part of their tech base. But it doesn't have to be a gravity bike to be a jet bike. It can have rockets. It can have. There's other ways to do it, right? The Space Marines ones are essentially little land speeders, because they have the grav plates that are used with land speeders and use them as a smaller level. We're going to have to talk about Arkan Land at some point, because that guy, he's kind of like the Victor von Frankenstein of 40K. He comes up with all these really wild inventions, and he's just not talked about too much. I'd like to do an episode on Arkan Land. Black Wolf 82, thanks for talking about my favorite chapter, and Merry Christmas. Same to you, sir. Are there any Wulfen leaders like named characters? The wolves are big on named characters. They are. Murderfang is the one named Wulfen that has a miniature. There's Bolvi Greybeard. There's Jordan Bloodhowl. Let me see. Miniatures wise, I think it's just Murderfang. There was Yalmar Stormfist. That was the guy during the 13th Black Crusade. Torvald the Reaver. Halfdan Baelai. Halfdan Baelai is one of my favorite guys from the 13th Company. This dude fought in the Battle of Prospero. And with the term Baelai, you already know what's up with him. He's got a big cybernetic glowing red eye, bionic eye. A lot of Space Marines have bionics. Baelai is a term that's only ever been applied to Yarrick, Commissar Yarrick, which is a very famous named character. So to find that there's a guy that came out a long time before him with the same name is pretty interesting. I would like to know more about Halfdan Baelai. Gygor Fellhand was part of the 13th Company, and Gygor has a model in Horse Heresy, at least. He's not Wulfen, but he does have wild hair. Check him out. Actually, I could bring up a picture of him. I'm pretty sure. To show you Gygor Fellhand, because he is pretty interesting dude as well. Gygor personally fought against Ahriman during the Battle of Prospero. He's got a Joy Toy figure. Let's see here. Nope. There we go. Okay. So, share screen. Apologies, guys. I don't often do this enough, so it's I'm talking to myself just to make sure I get all the steps correct. There we go. That's Gygor Fellhand. He's got look at that hair. Just look at that hair, for crying out loud. Whoosh. I mean, I wish I had hair like that, but trying to maintain that would just be ridiculous. He's a great model though. Like this is a good one of my favorite examples of like a good Space Wolf model. He's dripping with bling. He's got really cool hair. He's got so he's called the Gygor Fellhand. He carries the Fell Hand, which is a power claw. It's, you know, maybe this is where Bjorn gets his name, maybe, possibly. There's a lot of stories about how Bjorn the Fell-Handed became Bjorn the Fell-Handed, and none of them, we don't know exactly which one's true. But we do know this guy had an item called the Fell Hand that he walked around with. And Black Wolf 82 says, "Oh, that's sick." It is. I agree. Nestor Vitumbra, the Imperium could have stopped the 13th Black Crusade if only someone had thought to look at what technology the houses of Necromunda are hiding under the rug. Holy crow, you're not joking. So Necromunda is one of those IPs. It's how do I put this? It's 40K adjacent without actually being 40K. Necromunda is a planet in the setting of 40K. It literally exists, and this is where the Imperial Fists get some of their recruits from. It is a place that's talked about a little bit, but it became its own game in the 90s, which was a game about gangs fighting each other. And in the 2000s, Games Workshop started to split up all their IPs so that Warhammer Fantasy, Warhammer 40K weren't connected anymore. And then they started splitting up things like Space Hulk is its own game. It is not, if you have the license for Space Hulk, you do not have the license for everything 40K. And if you have the license for 40K, you do not have the license for Space Hulk. That is true for Necromunda as well now. So Necromunda is like its own little IP. But they do have a ton of wild stuff. And it's pretty interesting because they've been developing the lore for Necromunda over time to be a little more connected to 40K. There's these guys called Spirers, which are the sons and daughters of noble houses that like to go hunt the poor for sport. And they do this in these rigs, these power suits that new lore says they bought from the Tau, which is pretty wild and interesting. So yeah, the Necromunda is not, it's 40K adjacent, but it's not specifically 40K, but it does have access. The guys on Necromunda have access to a lot of wild tech that you just don't see anywhere else. You probably won't because it's kind of considered its own thing. But it would be interesting. Like, headcanon wise, I would love to see a Spyro team leave Necromunda and go hunt elsewhere in the galaxy, kind of like the Hirogen from Star Trek or the Predator, like, hey, hunting the poor for sport is fun and all, but what if we hunted other aliens? Or what if we hunted cultists? Or what if we hunted, it would just be wild. Space Marines, I imagine, would be the ultimate hunt, right? You'd be like, let's go kill a Space Marine. And that'd be pretty wild. I can't imagine that any other factions would really leave Necromunda. Like the gangers don't really have you can't just be an Escher ganger and be like, cool, we're leaving the planet and going somewhere else. That just doesn't happen. But the noble families in Necromunda, they have the means to get off planet if they really wanted to. So there's that. Jonathan King, 4923. I see someone's taking me up on my Ask Me Anything. What are some of your craziest headcanons you have for both 40K and fantasy? Ooh. Okay. Craziest headcanon for 40K and fantasy. Okay, so you guys may not know this, but Eltharion in fantasy is this elf who has different versions exist for Eltharion. Kind of like the 13th Company, they had this event called the Storm of Chaos, which is not actually canonical anymore. It's like a separate timeline. And in that timeline, Eltharion became this blind lore master. He had a strip of cloth wound around his eyes and carried one of the swords as a lore master instead of, being Elf Batman like he actually is. My craziest headcanon is that all these alternate timelines exist in the warp, like in the warp in 40K. In fantasy, it's the realm of chaos. In the realm of chaos, all of these different timelines are things that you can see if you have the right skills or the right magic, or if you're the right kind of being. If you're an elf and you can look into the vortex, you might be able to witness some events that are non-canonical. If you are a demon of Tzeentch, I'm sure there's places. I know a lot of Tzeentch guys have their own little fortresses and towers and places where they can scry on events happening elsewhere. So in my headcanon, there is definitely a magic mirror or something, a scrying pool, if you have it, where there is a guy who's literally standing there watching and seeing all the different threads, the multiverse of Warhammer Fantasy that kind of come together. That is until the end times occur. But if the end times occur and Storm of Chaos is a different timeline, then in the Storm of Chaos timeline, there's a guy standing at a scrying pool looking at Age of Sigmar and going, oh my God, that's where we could have been. That's probably my craziest fantasy headcanon. 40K craziest headcanon. All right. So my craziest 40K headcanon is that there's a faction of the Inquisition called the Thorians who believe that the Emperor must die in order to be reborn. And my craziest headcanon is that they're right. And that this is actually something that the Emperor has planned for. And that's what the Terminus Decree is for the Grey Knights, is that at the right time and at the right moments, the Grey Knights will work with the Custodians, I guess. I'm not sure how this, I'm not sure exactly how this will work, but the Grey Knights will somehow get to the throne, the Golden Throne, and end the Emperor's life so that he can be reborn, so that there can be a new Emperor created to take over where he left off. Is that a good thing? I don't know. Like I'm not entirely certain that's a result that's people would like and enjoy. I think it would probably be a time of extreme upheaval and danger and I mean just huge amounts of religious wars. The ecclesiarchy would lose its goddamn mind. Kind of like when Vultan came back as the new Sigmar for Storm of Chaos. I've said Storm of Chaos a lot more than I expected to in this stream. All right, so that's that question. I got a super chat. Hey, Stephen Lucas, man, you're killing it today. Thank you so much, brother. It was a text statement. Imperium just refused to use hover bikes because Xenos used them. because associated with heresy, and thus later forgot how to make them. Well, you're not wrong. The Imperium does make bad choices sometimes because of blind hatred. That's part of the satire of 40K, is that the Imperium is just so dysfunctional. It is so it works against itself in a lot of ways, and it is entirely reasonable to assume that at some point an Inquisitor or a tech priest or both, who knows, decided that, well, Eldar use jet bikes, hover bikes, we can't do that anymore, and they just stopped doing it. The Mechanicus can be like that. There is any group you think is a monolithic group in 40K is really just a bunch of little groups in a trench coat. They have a lot of internal strife and internal issues. So there is rarely a unified thought. Probably the closest thing to a unified thought is that every Inquisitor believes themselves to be a power unto themselves, right? Like Inquisitors' faith in themselves is probably the one thing that you can say, yeah, all Inquisitors have that. But yeah, it's not crazy to imagine that there would be a particularly conservative tech priest who was like, aliens use jet bikes, therefore we're not going to use them. That's tainted technology. We're not going to touch it. It's not sacred to the Omnissiah. Despite having had it in the past, those guys were all crazy. We're charting a new path forward, and it's going to be no jet bikes from here on out. That's entirely possible. Oh, yep. Read that one already. Read that one. Sorry, let me read this one out loud. Halo is haunted. This has been a great episode so far. Thank you. Love to hear peeps talking about the Warhammer history and lore. Hey, stick around. We do this a lot. This is a special stream because it's Christmas. But we have several shows, and we're going to do several more. I just know about some things, so it's great to learn more. Agreed. Even somebody like me who's been around Warhammer since the 90s, there's so much of it that I will forget about things, or somebody will mention a book that I haven't read, because I haven't read everything. Or even stuff I have read, I may have forgotten little bits and pieces of it. But you remember the stuff that really excites you. You remember the stuff that really grabs you. Like for me, it was the Infinity Circuit. It was the Wraithguard and the Wraith Lords, and that expanded out until I was fascinated by Drachenfels and the fantasy side. I read that novel and I was like, oh my god, this is great. So yeah, it's funny what your brain will latch onto. Absolutely. And here we go. Professor Shapp, Star Trek reference. Woo! Yeah, I'm a big Trekkie. There is mention of Eldari Kernite hunters amongst the Corsair fleets, and I like to imagine a similar Hirogen or Yautja thing. Yautja are the aliens from Predators. Kernite hunters among the Corsair fleets. Corsairs are cool AF. They are one of my favorite Eldar factions. I like them better than I like Harlequins, and I like Harlequins a lot. Forge Worlds built out a lot of stuff about the Corsairs, which is pretty fascinating. And I imagine that may be where you found this bit about the Kernite hunters, because that's interesting, and it starts to build in some of that wood elf-esque style that I imagine Exodites have. And that would be really building them out into the Corsairs. Ooh, oh boy, you guys are killing me. You're bringing up stuff all the time where my brain is like, this, I want to know more about this, and I definitely want to know more about the Eldari Kernite hunters. Let's get some models for those guys. We have plans for doing all the Eldar factions on the show, and when we talk about the Corsair fleets, please remind me about these. I'd like to bring that up. Odd one, 896. If allowed, which Abhuman race would you want to do a deep dive or redesign? So Abhumans, the most well-known Abhumans that are in the Imperium are the Ogrins and the Ratlings, followed by the Beastmen, and probably followed by the Felinids. So okay, this is a tough question. So on the one side, there's one part of my brain that loves 40k memes, just loves them. I mean, I love all the Gilliman and Ivrain, memes. I loved. I put as much memes as I could into Dark Heresy. Honestly, Love Can Bloom is a thing that we put into Dark Heresy as much as we could. For example, um, and on the meme side of my brain, Felonids would be the one I'd love to do a deep dive and a redesign on, because Catgirls and Catgirls with 40k, that would be pretty wild and cool and fun. That's the meme side of my brain. The more serious side of my brain, the one that's like, okay, that's, you're talking about fringe 40k. Let's bring it back. Let's bring it back to the center. Deep dive redesign Beastmen. So Beastmen have been around in 40k with models. There's old models of Beastmen, and now Necromunda's got them as well, and they've been mentioned in pretty recent books. I just read Gene Father by Guy Haley, and the Beastmen are featured in there too. So Beastmen as Abhumans would be really interesting. I think part of the reason Games Workshop has not wanted to do a lot with them is because obviously they're a major factor in the fantasy side over at Age of Sigmar and over at Fantasy. But developing who are the Beastmen in 40k would be pretty sweet. Are they just a random mutation? Are they from a specific region? Is there a particular world where they are born? Do they fall into the same similar categories as fantasy beastmen, like Gores, Ungores, Doom Bulls? We know that Minotaurs are part of them, for sure, and we know that there's a very Gore-like figure. If you look at the, you know what? I should just. This is turning out to be a very image-heavy stream, but I'm going to see if I can find the Necromunda Beastman for you, because he's super cool. Yeah, Gore Halfhorn is this guy's name. And Gore Halfhorn. There we go. Come on. I just want the image. Sorry, internet's being a jerk. Anyway, Gore Halfhorn. This might be a better way to do it. Yeah, there we go. Okay. I'm going to bring it up. That is Gore Halfhorn for Necromunda. And he's got a plasma pistol, looks like. A chainsword. Got a pistol across his chest. He's wearing a guardsman issue flak vest there. You can see the winged skull on his chest, which is the emblem of the Astra Militarum. So this is a guy who's been around with the Imperial Guard. And yeah, I'd like to know more. I'd like to, are the Beastmen, a deep dive on Beastmen in 40k would probably break down into like, okay, are there Gores and Ungores? Are there Minotaurs? Are there the big ass monsters like the Cygors? Do we have Centigores? Do we have, like, is there an equivalent, for these things? Personally, I don't think I would want to port over, just take Beastmen out of 40k, Beastmen out of Fantasy and put them in 40k as is. I'd want to do a redesign. I'd want to say, okay, there is a basic Beastman, and Gore Halfhorn is an example of a basic Beastman, but the more advanced Beastmen are different in some ways. And I definitely wouldn't want, we also have Beastmen also as Chaos models. The Zangors and Korngors they exist for the Chaos factions as well. So that would be kind of interesting to see, like, to do them in 40k without just making them the same thing would be interesting. It's wild that this guy's name is Gore Halfhorn. It is Gore Halfhorn, right? Yeah, Gore Halfhorn. His name is Gore, which is, that's how they refer to Beastmen in fantasy, as different types of Gores. But Necromunda is not exactly 40k, just like, there's squats in Necromunda that are maybe not Leagues of Votan. So who knows? But that's my answer to that. Good question. Nestor Vitumbra, wasn't there a mention in Dark Heresy of something similar to Spyro Rigs and Calixtus? Yes, because I put it in there, because I love Spyrers. Although it's not nearly as developed as the ones in Necromunda. By the way, is it worth to minis today, or is the showcase on Saturdays? We can. I'll tell you what. I will see if I can grab some minis. But this, I do have to leave this stream after a little bit because I do have Christmas dinner coming up, and I would love to cover some minis. Go ahead and put your minis in. I'll see if I can get to them. Halo Sun, I don't want to spam too much, bro. Just put them out. Just put them out there. We'll see if we can cover them. Osmolos 0575. Oh, great, Ross Lorebeard. Just Ross is okay. Can you tell us something about Anton Zerb? I saw he's a big player in the new Owlcat game. Oh, is he really? Fascinating. All right. On Zerb. All right, let me think about that for a second. All right. So Anton Zerb was an inquisitor in the Ordo Calixus. Actually, a Lord Inquisitor. He was a top ranked dude. He was the commissioned leader of the Tyrantine Cabal. The Tyrantine Cabal is a group of Inquisitors who are studying the Tyrant Star. So if he's in the new Dark Heresy game, if Anton Zerb is a big player, that means the Tyrant Star is a big player. And I'm fascinated. I am curious to see what they end up doing with the Tyrant Star. They're not beholden to follow the story of the Tyrant Star, which is told through the Harlock's Legacy series of adventures. So they could probably do whatever they wanted. But Zerb is the head of that group. He's not the head of the Inquisition in Calixus. That's Lord Inquisitor Kaidin. I'm gonna say Kaidin. And yeah, he's the guy in charge of dealing with the Tyrant Star. There's a black doctrine that he came up with regards to the Tyrant Star, which is basically suppressing everything about it. You know, if the Tyrant Star causes a disturbance, the black doctrine is to go in and, like, you know, either Men in Black that shit, or you didn't see anything, nothing happened here, understand? He stays at the Bastion Serpentis most often. Very secretive, very inscrutable. He's pretty paranoid. I can tell you about that. Zerb is paranoid. He thinks something really bad is happening with the Tyrant Star. To be fair, he's right. He's got a distinctive mask. It's like a gold sun mask that he wears. Masks are one of the main themes of the Calixtic sector in general, which is interesting. So that it makes him very iconic. So there's the Maccabean Janissaries, which are the guardsmen from the Calixtus sector, and they also wear masks because that's a theme of the region. Yeah, I don't know. It's got to be related to the Tyrant Star. And again, I'm not sure what direction they're going to take that in, but I hope it's cool. Did I read this one already? Chris M 77. Thank you, sir. Happy holidays to all the Lorebeards. Happy holidays to you too, buddy. Thanks for teaching me about Warhammer Fantasy 40K. You're welcome, man. I've been doing it a long time. So, question from Nestor Vitumbra. It would be interesting to see more lore about the Afriel strain. This is another, like, Abhuman group. The Afriel strain. Yeah, I agree. It would be really interesting to see them. They were... The Afriel strain. Experimental Abhumans for the Astra Militarum, the Imperial Guard. They blended the gene stock of the Imperium's greatest heroes. It's kind of like Serpentor from G.I. Joe. They took little pieces of DNA from their greatest heroes and built these guys called the Afriel strain. They were formidable fighters, but they were infamous because they were albinos. They were all very... they were also hated. Just everyone hated them. They suffered uncanny bad luck, which led to the whole project getting abandoned. Part of me wonders if this is, not related to, so genetic manipulation and stuff like this is very much an edge case for the orthodox Adeptus Mechanicus. Tech heresy begins not very far away from the Aphriel strain. Like doing massive cloning projects, that's tech heresy. Cloning important figures, that's tech heresy. So this is wildly radical for the Adeptus Mechanicus to do this kind of thing. But there have been radicals. Call is considered a radical by a lot of the Mechanicus. Oof. It was so the thing about the Aphriel strains, they were intentionally created as genetic engineering project rather than naturally evolved. Like the Ogrins and the Ratlings are evolutions. You can argue the Beastmen are an evolution, but they're considered more of a type of mutation. Yeah, they were just unsettling, and people didn't like them, and they were freaks of having bad luck. Yeah, I wonder. There's not a lot of lore on these guys. It's not worth like a whole episode to get into them, but that project abandoned. I'm sure there's an Inquisitor somewhere who's like, I'm going to make my whole retinue out of these guys. All right. Halo's Haunted. Beastman would be sick as a true 40k faction. Agreed. And Ethan Cox, 1826. I think one of the best things about 40k Beastmen is we can see them in context that aren't evil bad guys who just hate society, because that's true. Beastmen straddle the line. They're often portrayed as being part of the lost and the damned, as being mutants that are looked down on and are unjustly oppressed because they're mutants. But they also can be bounty hunters. They can be soldiers in the Astra Militarum. Have been in the past. Some of the old lore talks about beastmen regiments. It's an interesting lens to look at the Imperium through from the beastmen's perspective, because they are contextually, like you say, they're not necessarily just evil bad guys who are corrupt for reasons. Halo's Haunted says they have killed beastmen at the moment in Sigmar. Oh, that's a bummer. Good old Goldtrek and Felix, great name. I never even thought about Beastmen in 40k. I didn't think they existed over there. They do. They're just very, very minor. They're mostly background. When Gore Halfhorn came out, I want to say, when did Gore Halfhorn come out? About 6-7 years ago? More like 10, maybe. It's recent enough that my memory is like he's pretty recent. Gore is a pretty recent guy, and it was a big deal because it's the first time we'd seen a Beastman in 40k or 40k adjacent, as Necromunda is. For a very, very long time. And Genefather was written not that long ago either. Genefather was written 2023, so that's only a couple of years ago. They were mentioned pretty big in that book. All right. Halo's Haunted. I'm going to kitbash a Skaven kill team sometime in the future, blooded based. Go for it, buddy. Love to see it. Noth, you play. Good old Gotrix and Felix. Beastman got some minis last year for Kill Team. Felgor Ravagers. Oh, shit, I forgot about these guys. You're right. The Felgor Ravagers. Thanks for bringing that up. So they are back. They are back as of last year as a kill team. A kill team is not adjacent. That is straight up 40k. Wow. They're a Beastman tribe who live aboard the Gallodark, which is... The Gallodark is a ancient space Hulk that drifts in and out of the warp and kill and real space. That's where they were fighting in that kill team release, was on board the Space Hulk. Wow. Okay, wild. They have Tox horns, Flux Brays, Iron horns, Herd goads, Vandals, Shamans. These are just gores, basically. But they have like bionics and stuff. It's really cool. There should be a good image of these guys somewhere. Yeah, here we go. Let me just add it to the stream here. There we go. That's the Felgor Ravagers. They are essentially, I mean, if you were to look at a fantasy analog, these are just basically Gors. Possibly Bestigors, like the higher level ones. They're I don't see anything that looks like an Ungor, but they have a shaman and they have like a Minotaur. So this is, yeah, okay. So this would be a great starting point. I think we just added a new topic to Lorebeards. We need to talk about the Fulgor Ravagers and the state of Beastmen in 40k. That would be cool as hell. Hawk Oddly, they mentioned the Tyrant Star in the alpha. Yeah, this is for the Dark Heresy game from Alcap. Yeah, they're definitely going to die. Absolutely, 100%. Afriel's trade Serpentor. This is command. This I command was Serpentor's catchphrase. The perfect clones with extremely bad luck. That's who they were. Non-Astartes Lamenters. Ooh, the Lamenters are a chapter of Space Marines successors for the Blood Angels that have just been a punching bag. they have gone through some serious hard times. We're going to talk about the Lamenters when we talk about the Battle War. The Battle War is also a really very fascinating part of 40k history that I want to get into at length. Ethan Cox, 1826. I'd love it if they use the Beastmen in 40k with more nuance in fantasy, where they just kind of feel like orcs, but more chaosy and with more goats. Yeah, in fantasy, they have a very problematic issue as to how Beastmen reproduce, and I'll leave that to Andy and Sotek to explain. But you're right. It would be nice to see them with more nuance. I'm kind of curious what nuance you'd want to inject into them. Like, would you want them to? I'm curious. Yes, more nuance. I agree. I'm just not sure what that would be at the moment in time. It'd be kind of fun. At least in their normal depiction, there are other depictions that are more interesting. Yeah, agreed. Nathi play. Clearly time for the Felinids to shine. Yeah, I know. Like I said, the meme side of my brain was like, let's do Felinids. Did you watch the Warpfire parody song by Greyfax about St. Celestine? No, I haven't. Haven't seen too many of the parody songs. I've seen some. And Stringstorm, by the way, for people who like 40k music, go check out Stringstorm. They have some really good tunes for 40k. Particularly, I like Titanicus and Adeptus Sororitas. And also there's a guy. I'm gonna have to bring up my iTunes. There's this guy who did a song about the Space Wolves recently that is so rad. What is this guy's name? The guy I'm thinking of is, here we go. Colm McGuinness is his name. COLM McGuinness, McGuinness. Colm McGuinness wrote, he's got a song called To the Eye We Shall Return, which is a great chaos song. And he's got one about Space Wolves, which is called Claim Our Kill. And I really like that one a lot. So yeah, 40k music. There's some really good 40k music out there. All right, what am I missing? Kind of lost my place here. Fishmen in 40k. Oh Lord. Oh no. Oh no, not the Fishmen. Kurashima, what are you trying to do to me? Fishmen in 40k. Ludicrous. Hawk says, I'm actually painting that kill team. So you're painting the Felgors. That's cool. He also says the Dark Heresy Alpha mentions the Tyrant Star, so the game seems to be about it. Yeah, that's if I was going to make a Dark Heresy video game, it would be about the Tyrant Star, because that is one of the biggest mysteries in the setting, and it can literally appear anywhere, so it's pretty great. Ethan Cox says, consider a Beastman faction as American revolutionaries to the Imperium's British Empire. Fighting for freedom is not a bad theme to go with. It's tough though, because 40k doesn't have good guys by design. It doesn't have good guys. It's interesting. I think you've got something there that would be kind of a neat angle to take. Is it the angle? I'm not sure, but it's an interesting angle. He says literally cowboys. Womp womp. We've got a comment here from Lunar White Wolf Fox. We need a Battle War episode after the new Huron Blackheart model announced. Yes, we do. Huron Blackheart's a really fascinating dude. The Battle War is a fascinating moment in time. So we talked earlier this episode about the burning of Prospero. One of the reasons why the burning of Prospero is such a big deal is because it is the first massive scale Astartes on Astartes conflict in Imperial history. Unless you count the two missing legions, which there's not enough lore to even speculate about the two missing legions, really. So possibly the earliest was the two missing legions. The one we know of for sure, though, is Prospero. And Prospero happens, I want to say, a year before the heresy, or before Isstvan 3. Isstvan 3 is what most people consider the beginning of the Horus Heresy. Like, that's the first true act of rebellion. Okay. Whereas Prospero was a kind of like a police action. It was meant to be an arrest that got out of hand. If you look at it that way. But so the burning of Prospero is the first major Astartes on Astartes conflict. What does that have to do with the Battle War? The Battle War is the most well-known and largest internal conflict amongst the Astartes. And I mean loyalist Astartes. There were loyalists on both sides. Yes, the Austerclaws did become the Red Corsairs and went to chaos. Yes, that's true. But it was during the Battle War itself, it was Emperor-loving Astartes versus Emperor-loving Astartes. And it was multiple legions or multiple chapters on both sides. So it was for the Imperium, that was a major flare-up. That was a huge deal where multiple chapters went to war with each other. And yeah, it's important and it's exciting. And there's a lot of really great lore about it, about what happened during it. And you get to look at, one of the things that's really fascinating about the Battle War is it focuses on chapters you don't really see in other, it doesn't focus on the big five, right? It doesn't focus on the Ultramarines, the Salamanders, the Black Templars, Imperial Fifth, Space Wolves. It instead focuses on the Raptors and the Austerclaws and the Lamenters and the Mantis Warriors, and just like all these little chapters that hardly ever get a lot to go on. They got to take center stage in the Battle War, and that's what's really cool about it. If you're not familiar with the Raptors or the Mantis Warriors or the Lamenters or the Austerclaws, I urge you to check them out. They're actually really interesting chapters. Really, they have a lot of cool beliefs, traditions, and lore. And the Battle War was when they got their time in the spotlight. It was kind of like hey, let's turn the spotlight on the little guys for a change. That's why I love the Battle War. So Hawk Oddly says, I have to show you some of Cole's stuff he started doing for 40K. So that's Cole McGinnis, right? Doing the music we talked about earlier. Is there a new Huron Blackheart model announced? I wasn't aware of that. I am going to jump over to the Discord and see if I can grab some models for us to look at and observe. That is in the forums, mini postings. There we go. Okay. Usually Alexis takes care of this. I'm honestly not sure where we left off last time, so I'm going to grab what I can. And we're going to do this kind of guerrilla style. I am not doing it where I download the images and then set up another thing for it. Bear with me, guys. I do appreciate your patience. I'm flying solo for the first time today, and that means I'm not exactly on the ball as much as I'd like to be. Okay, we've got a Primaris. Is this a captain or a lieutenant? I think this is one of the many, many lieutenants. And this is posted by Lenny. He is an Ultramarine. It's got a really nice... So Ultramarines got a big glow up in the early 2000s. They used to be blue and yellow, like real yellow. And then in the early 2000s, they switched that out with gold. And blue and gold is a much better combo than blue and yellow. And the gold and blue contrast on this guy is particularly good. This is a very clean model. Everybody knows what I'm going to say about this model, right? Work on your base. Put something on that base to finish it off. I'm not going to talk about the base anymore. I'm going to talk about the model. Really good work. White is difficult to paint. It is not the easiest color because usually the undercoat will, you can kind of see the undercoat underneath it. And it usually takes more than a few passes of brush or the right undercoat or the right primer to really work. So good job on the white. Really like the red sunburst on his jousting shield there. And great work on the leather for the holster. That's really nice looking. Yeah, overall, I don't have a lot of comments on this. It's got good highlights. Tabletop ready. Absolutely. Looks great. Big fan. Let me see. Can I just go through? Yeah, here we go. Here's a lieutenant. We know this is a lieutenant for sure. I have a lieutenant helmet back there with the red stripe on it. Nice work on the banner. Is that a hand-painted banner? Can't tell for sure. Power sword looks really good. You know what? Can I embiggen this? I don't know how to make it bigger, but it looks great. Good highlights on the tabard. And again, the red really looks good with the jousting shield. Although in this case, I think the purity seal is getting lost. You might want to consider like a purple purity seal instead of a red there to make it stand out a little bit from the red. So yeah, that's about all the comments I have on that. And here's a whole squad. Check these guys out. Are these veterans? Stern Guard, I think. So first of all, one guy's got a beaky helmet. Love beaky helmets. Mark 6 Corvus armor. Love it. One of my favorites. Laurel's Victory on his head there. The bolt rifles are looking good. And he did. So one thing I want to point out, this guy did, when photographing your minis, it's important to put something white underneath them. That's how the colors stand out. If you had a white sheet behind them, that would be even a little bit better because it helps the light reflect. Dirty Steve himself taught me some of these tricks on how to photograph minis. So I'm going to pass them on to you. Put a white sheet behind it if you really want to make a pop. But good work. These guys look great. Not really any comments here I can share. Let me see if I can bring up another one. Got some stuff from Halo. Got a Necron. Okay, Halo. So you have satisfied the basic requirements, and I know. So when it comes to model painting, I'm kind of the bad cop in the room. My boss at Games Workshop was a guy called Dave Taylor, and Dave Taylor is pretty well known. You can search Dave Taylor painted miniatures on Google, and you'll see he's a freak of nature. Dave is amazing. So Dave is the guy who taught me how to paint and how to judge paint. And from what Dave taught me, I can say here that this is a good basic start. There's things you can do to improve the look of a Necron. They are just mostly metal, and it's fine to paint them as mostly metal on the body. Have you tried a wash? Has this model been washed? Have you used a Nuln Oil on this? I'd recommend using a wash to get into all the little crevices and darken those up a little bit to give you a nice contrast. The back half of the gun is nice, although the green is a little dark it doesn't really pop on that cable. And the green on the barrel towards the end, you've got it both in the recesses and you've got it on the nodules that are coming up out of the recesses. If you want to hit those nodules with maybe a slightly different color, darker green or a lighter white or a lighter yellow, maybe to help it stand out from the back, it's kind of getting muddy a little bit in there with that green. But you did great on the little blade, the bayonet on the end. And you know what I'm going to say, put something on that base. If he's walking on flock or sand or something like that, there's some pretty, one of the things I like to do for bases is there's a lot of guys who do custom bases out there with like texture on it, like grid or stone or metallic cables. if you don't want to do a lot of base work, it's pretty easy to order one of those pre-made bases and then just paint it up like you paint the model, and it gives us something to stand on. You definitely don't want a metallic rim. Like, make that rim on the base black or green would be one of my first suggestions. And going back to the model and the color green on his rifle, if that green is an energy green, I would also put that on his eyes. I'd do the same color on his eyes to help that pop out. So hopefully that's helpful. Let's see. Oh, wow. All right, this is another one from Halo, I think. Who is this? Sorry, give me a second. Let me just make sure I'm clear on the author here. This is Halo. Yeah, okay. Just double checking. So Halo, this is a Emperor's Children, and we've talked about the Emperor's Children on this show before. This is a really good Emperor's Children. The blade is looking a little dark, dull, is what I would say. Give that blade a something. Even just blood stains along the edge of it would probably make that look good. But the purple is really nice. Good work on the shoulder pad. I love the shoulder pad. Backpack's looking really good. Power pack's looking really good. Drill out your barrel on the bolt pistol, and that is a great base. Well done. Appreciate the base on this one. That's a close-up on that guy. All right, cool. Let me just see. That was all of those. Yep. Yeah, that's all of Halo's. We've got stuff. Oh, we got more stuff from Halo. Oh, the novitiates. Remember the novitiates, the Sisters of Battle? Check this out. Love the face. Great work on the face. The clothing is good. Like the glove. The power sword could use, the base is good also as well. Good job with the base. The power sword could use some something. It looks a little too plain. I'm not sure what that would be. Alexis would probably tell you to put like the lightning stuff on there. You don't necessarily have to have that. It can be just a case of doing some work on the cross piece or the quillins or the pommel. Or it can just be literally put blood across it to, make it pop a little more. It's just a little dull, but that's good. I like she's got the emblem of the ecclesiarchy on her chest. That's getting a little bit lost too. Maybe if the skulls were a little more distinct. I'm not sure. Plasma pistol's looking all right. Drill out that barrel. Yeah, overall, that's pretty good. I like it. That is a tabletop quality mini, and I would be happy to have that in my army. Nice terrain as always, Halo. Great work. And is it all just, wait, hang on. I thought you did more. Oh, okay. You got a Lieutenant and Phobos armor for the Raptors. There we go. All right, Raptors, one of my favorite chapters. These are the most practical Space Marines. That is a badass Raptor. No notes. It's rare for me to say this, but yeah, I wouldn't change a thing. That guy looks great. No notes at all. That's Phobos armor. Okay, so all right, I do have a note now. The white shoulder pad needs something on it. You can have a black shoulder pad because it can be a black shield, but if you're going to have a white shoulder pad, there should be an emblem or company marking, something on it. So that's my note. Combi Flamer looks great. Oh, he's a Tyranid war veteran. He's got the Tyranids on his arm there. And green blood. Look at the green blood on the knife. That's hot. Love it. Really appreciate that. I like that it's a different green, a more vibrant green than the dull drab, olive drab for the armor. Okay. What else we got? He's got a set of terrain for kill team. This is something I've talked about before. Terrain adds a lot to a table, and it adds a lot to a photo shoot. Actually, even if you have it there, look at that. That's pretty good. That's see those white skulls, how they stand out from the red. That's what I'm talking about when I say like something that pops, something you can see from a distance. Yeah, that looks really good. No notes on terrain. Terrain, I'm a lot kinder to than because terrain is terrain. Models are models. It's very unusual to spend a lot of time on terrain. You really just want to get that on the table. All right. Halo, I think that might be all of your stuff. And we've got a set of, wow, are these, I think these are Leagues of Votan from Jester Boy. Wow. Love that singular eye painted there. Very Zaku. The bases, okay, so if you're going to have a dark rim and have a dark sand, that's going to get muddy. It's going to flow into each other. Make either paint the sand a different color, maybe red, or paint the base rim green or something like that to make that stand out. Again, put him on a taking a photo here. He's got the white underneath him, which is helpful. Put a white behind him. That'll help the picture as well. Looking good. Yeah, those are Leagues of Votan. I'm not sure what they're called. Ironkin, I think. The glowing power coils look really nice. Yeah, that's very nice. That's tabletop quality. Looks great. No notes other than the base. And Friend or Trader. Oh boy. Yeah, I do see where we left off last time. Okay. Friend or Trader has gifted us some really nice minis. Look at this. Look at that. Look at that. God dang, that's nice. So for a while there, it seemed like every Golden Demon, everybody was bringing Nurgle because they could just go crazy with Nurgle. So I'm kind of biased against Nurgle stuff these days. But this is a very good Nurgle mini. I'm a fan. You probably already know what I'm going to say. That base is really boring. Do something with that base. The bolter, I'd like a better look at that bolter. I feel like that bolter's kind of muddy too. Like it's just not quite there yet. If I were judging this in a painting competition, I'd want a closer look at that bolter. But just this is absolutely perfect for tabletop. This is a great, put it on the table, play mini. Absolutely. 100%. Looks good. Bells look nice. I like that the bells have a different color than the chain. That is a common mistake. Very good. All right. This is still Friend or Trader, and this is his. Is that Gazgul? That's the new Gazgul. Wow. Now that's a base, my friend. Look at that. You put the razor wire on there. I don't think that comes with it, does it? Nice. I think the red on the gob is maybe a little thick there. The white and black on the gob is looking I'm not sure that I think the gob is not the place for the white and black. I would do maybe a shoulder pad. Like the right shoulder there. But it looks good. Especially like the skull on top with the twin exhausts up there. That's really good. I have a feeling you might benefit from thinning your paint a little bit. I just have that feeling. I don't know if I could say that for certain, but that's really good. That's really good. And demons. Look at all these demons. Looks like you got Poxwalkers. Nope. Those are. You got the pink horrors and the blue horrors. Yeah. That looks good. Demons are, yeah, they're not exactly my favorite mini. A lot of demons just kind of blur together in my brain. I'm not sure what it is. I just can't really pick. It's hard for me to pick them out sometimes on the tabletop. But this is a good picture. Also backed with white. He's got the white on the back and the walls. That's a good way to make these models look good. Yeah, not bad. Not much else I could say about that. That's a good set of demons there. And that's all the new models that we have. So there you go. Oh, we've got a super chat I need to read. Ricky Chapman, 3377. We want to make a full Abhuman only guard. Army stuff like Longshanks proxying sentinels. Those centaur Abhumans, centaurs, as Rough Riders, and maybe 2 Ogren holding a tank turret for a Russ. Oh. That would be an interesting conversion. Abhuman only guard. So in the Astra Militarum, Abhumans are considered what's called auxilia forces, which means they don't the guard themselves, the Ashimotarm, they do not field just Abhumans. They field them as auxiliaries. They're attached to normal guard units. But this is a really cool idea, and there's a million worlds out there. I'm sure one of them is like showed up with a tithe of nothing but Abhumans at least once. Oh boy, that'd be wild to show up to a battlefield and who's holding the left flank? All those freaks. And you just look over and see two Ogren lugging a turret around. That would be wild. Love this idea. Really, really cool. The new Ratlings, for example, are great. Love those guys. All right, so I am basically out of minis. You've got about 10 minutes left before I have to run off and do Christmas dinner. So any more questions? Ask me anything. What would you like to know? Anybody. Abhumans are cool. It would probably be worth doing a whole episode on Abhumans, because we can cover Ogrins and Ratlings and Beastmen and Aphriel Strain and Gland Warriors. Actually, there's the list of Abhumans is pretty wild. Something that I would like to go over, because Abhumans in general, let's see. Aphriel Strain, Beastmen, Felinids, Gland Warriors, Goliaths, that's Longshanks, there they are. Unusually tall, with a large, and they're unusually fast because of their large gait. They're easy targets because of their height. God, I'm not sure if have I ever seen a Longshank? Technically, Navigators are Abhumans. Yeah, Longshanks are mentioned in the 6th edition of Warhammer and in a few novels. And in Liber Xenologus. I've got to pick up a copy of Liber Xenologus. It seems like somebody realized that Xenology was a really, really bad book, and they wanted to like fix it, and that's what Liber Xenologus is, I think. Oh, Rick Chapman, let's do a make an Abhuman. How do we not just keep that from being Fishmen and Felinids, though? Nightsiders are a type of Abhuman, which are basically like cave people. If you met like the guys from Descent, the movie, where they live in darkness, so their eyes are adapted and all that, which is pretty wild. Ogrins, Pelagirs are the ones, they're the Fishmen, the Abhumans. You want to talk about Fishmen, talk about Pelagirs. Ratlings, of course. Scalies. The Scalies. These guys are from Necromunda. They're big, strong. They're like a little Ogren covered in scales. They're more reptilian, although their face is still mostly human. Think Killer Croc from Batman is Scalies. And those guys are relatively stable. Not as stable as Ogrins, but they're pretty stable. They have a very fearsome reputation because they eat everything. Let's see here. Stilt limbs. Subs. There's just called subs. That's wild. Thrix and Siskins. Oh my gosh. There's a ton of these guys. There's almost as many Abhumans as there are minor Xenos factions. So that'll be fun to do. All right. First question we've got here is from Jonathan King, 4923. What's your opinion on Balthazar Gelt? I see you, Jonathan King. I know what you're doing. All right. So Balthazar Gelt is, in my opinion, a pretty cool dude. I like his look. I like his focus on magic. I like his representation in Total War Warhammer. Transformation of Lead is pretty, or Final Transmutation is pretty good spell. He's interesting. Do I love him? No. Do I think he's a great character? He's a good character. He's interesting. And I like that he's deeply involved in the politics of the Colleges of Magic, which is a big part of fantasy lore. So generally I like him. I think he's cool. I'm sure that Andy and Sotek have a different opinion, and that's fine. So Kurinshima 3912. Do you think there's any chance, like decades from now, that 40K would get an end times treatment, but better, and the setting transition into something else like Age of Sigmar? Is there a chance? There definitely is a chance. If they did it to fantasy, they can do it to 40K. Is that chance a large chance? Do I think it will happen? Someday. I think someday. Right now, 40K is incredibly popular. It's made Games Workshop the most profitable country in all of Britain. Last time I checked, in all of UK, they were the most profitable company. And as long as 40K continues to sell extremely well, I doubt they're going to do too much to it. But then I got blindsided by the whole Cicatrix Maledictum and Gilliman coming back. I didn't know that was going to happen. I didn't think it was going to happen. So they've surprised me before. They could surprise me again. But as far as I think, it's not going to happen soon. I think everybody's, in my opinion, a lot of people are holding their breath waiting to see how the Amazon show goes, because that has a lot of potential. The potential of the Amazon show is big. And I'm not alone. A lot of there's quite a few people out there, including my former boss, the CEO of the company I was working at for the Post-heresy game, would believe that 40K is on the precipice of exploding into pop culture. It's primed to become the next Star Wars, in a lot of ways. It just needs that last little push. And the Amazon show might be that last little push. And I think I don't think it'll happen next year. If I was to guess, if this were to happen, it probably won't happen for at least 5 years, maybe more than 10, maybe more than 20. Because fantasy was around, it was around from 95 to 2015. So good 20 years. I don't know. It certainly could happen. I agree that it certainly could happen. I agree that it certainly might happen. And I just have no idea when that'll be, because right now it's just very, very popular. Hawk Godly says tier list of Abhumans. Okay, good call. Professor Shapp, the look of Gelt with the golden mask seems to be recurring more and more now. Like, you got him, Dante, Zerb, and there's a new character in Necromunda with a similar gold mask. Well, masks can be cool. And we did a lot of masks in the Dark Heresy on purpose. It was part of the collection sector. I'd love to do a deep dive into the history of Dark Heresy someday. There's a lot going on there, and you guys might lose your mind at some of the weird stuff that happened before the book even got published. I could talk about that. Those files are wild. Anyway, but the two main themes of the Calixix sector in terms of visuals, one is masks and the other is chalices or cups. Calixis is an old way. It's like a bastardized Latin of a chalice. So in Dark Heresy, you may notice from time to time there's emblems of chalices and cups and things like that. The Absolvers chapter Space Marines uses a chalice as one of its symbols, and that's one of the reasons why they were in Wrath and Glory, for example. Okay. Nightsiders showed up in the Eternal Darkness book. They were working with the Catachan against Kroot. A lot of Kroot in that book. It's a fantastic read. Thank you, Ricky Chapman. I'll have to check that out. I do like Kroot, and I like Nightsiders. Dowie Forever. Thank you, sir. Do you think they should expand on psychic disciplines? Psychics and psychic powers in general, I would love to see, like they did the Psychic Awakening, and that was cool. And it is a big part of the lore. The psychic disciplines, it's important to remember, the disciplines are not like the Winds of Magic. A guy who's a biomancer in 40K can also throw firebolts if he really wants to, if he learns how. So, yes, the short answer is yes. Alfarius is still working for the Cabal in one of mine. Sure, why not? The Cabal. That's a weird thing. That's a very weird thing from the Heresy. The Cabal and Perpetuals are just some of the most mystifying things. So Dan Abnett is one of the writers. It's had a big chunk of Black Library devoted to him, and he's had a major impact on 40K. He's the reason we know what radios are called in 40K. They're called Vox. He's the reason we know what fuel is called in 40K. It's called Promethium. He came up with those names. And Dan is also the guy who created the Cabal. He created the Perpetuals, and he created Enuncia, which is another very mysterious thing. Now, what's wild about those three things that I just mentioned is they're typically only in his books. Like, other writers don't really touch on those things very much. I think the Cabal may have been touched by some other writers in the Horus Heresy line, but I don't know of anybody who's done things with a Nuncia other than Dad. And for a while there was this thing called like the Daniverse, where all these things were kind of contained. But yeah, the Cabal is wild. And that would be fun to talk about. Although it would be a lot of hemming and hawing and speculation because there's just not much known. So, Lord Vorn, have you been following Owlcat's Dark Heresy game? Yes. I am very excited and interested in it. I want to start streaming Rogue Trader actually pretty soon. I think that'd be a lot of fun. And Rush 2129. Bro, you're killing me with that name. The new Hero Blackheart model looks sick. I bet it does. I haven't seen it yet. I'll have to take a look. All right, so if that's about it, y'all, I'm going to head off to do some Christmas dinners. It's been wonderful hanging out with y'all today. Thank you so much. Merry Christmas to all of you. The Imperium has celebrations of various names. Oh, Lord Vorn. Watching you stream Rogue Trader would be peak. Thank you. I would like, I'm actually thinking of calling it Rogue Trader Plays Rogue Trader. I think it'd be a lot of fun. Anyway, Merry Christmas to you. Merry Christmas to all of you guys. Happy holidays. I hope you have a great break and, you know, relax. Make sure you spend some time with your family, your loved ones, your friends. 40K is a dark and grim place, but the world doesn't have to be. So let's reach out to our buddies. Find somebody who you haven't talked to in a while and just, you know, say hello. Extend an olive branch. It's Christmas. It's the right time of year. Anyway, it's been wonderful spending this time with you guys, and I'll see you on Saturday because we have a new show coming up on Saturday, and we're going to be broadcasting again. I'm probably going to do a solo one again next week. I don't know what the topic is yet, but for New Year's. But see you guys then. Take care.